academic and just academic interests. Classes they like, topics they like, and strengths.
And social what?
Social and behavioral strengths. Problems that need to be solved. And then key school supports that they rely on or need. Thank you, Glenn.
You're welcome.
Thank you. You want some chocolate?
Literally.
Key school supports that they rely on or need.
When you're done, you'll have to show me where those wires came from. So
Academic interests. Okay, then, so the third one, problems that need to be solved. Fourth one,
Key school support that is needed.
school support.
And that can be things they're getting and they rely on, or things they need and they're not getting. Just key school support. So try to list 3 to 4 things within each block real quick because it will help you stay on.
Did she get the sign in? Did you get the sign in? Oh, yeah. Yes, okay.
Social behaviors that needs strengths.
Strengths. So the top 2 are strengths. Now it can be something very small. Strengths can be eye contact. Strengths can be ability to focus strongly on a specific topic. All of those are strengths for some reason.
How many bullet points on each one? 3 on each one?
4. There's many as you can do, but you need 3 to 4 to work with.
The third one, problems that need to be solved.
Yeah, there's tons of food.
Oh my God, there's so much food, please
eat it.
We drove to McDonald's and we were rushing and they gave us the wrong order.
Of course.
There's only really one thing that Annie likes at McDonald's and it wasn't that, was it? That was a no-go.
Is there anything she likes over there?
Oh, that's basically everything she likes.
Fantastic. Because I bought food for like 30 people. I mean, I do that for my family too, and there's only 5.
That's what I do too. And then my kids just.
I'm like, it's on sale.
I don't know. Academic interests, social and behavioral strengths, problems that need to be solved, and key school supports. This one needed to be.
Yeah.
They have none.
That's okay.
But no academic interest.
That's allowed. That will be a goal then. So
Bless you.
you didn't run this morning. I'm just not noticing.
Not the marathon, because I'd still be going. I'm not done yet.
Well, the first guy's done.
The 10K.
The first
it's
guy was
backwards.
marathon. I mean,
Oh, well, yeah.
Oh, really?
They're like
yeah.
super
I
short.
watched it before
Yeah,
I
they
left.
are. Did you do this?
It was amazing.
Wow.
It was a good race actually because this one guy was in the lead for a while at mile 20, all by himself, no one around, but then he started to slow down, and so it was him and another guy, and it was to
No, but
the
still.
it was to the finish.
So it was.
Did you watch it?
Yeah.
Like, in the stadium? Oh, on.
Oh, no. One secret. Please, I'm not going anywhere.
Turn the computer around with that.
Zach was just so, it was so easy for me to get there.
I just went down.
Yeah. I'm not gonna do that.
So is anybody here a YouTube person that would know why this is showing backwards? It's displaying, it's filming it backwards. Like Megan is sitting over there and the screen is backwards.
Well, when
it
I watched
does-
some of the people doing the LuLaRoe stuff, they have to, there should be somewhere where you can flip it.
Yeah, it's just like your, it's just like your,
On your phone, you should be able to flip the,
it's just like on your
Okay. Amy.
camera thing, you know, yeah, on your, That's bizarre.
So
Okay,
here.
are the words backwards?
Yes.
Oh, that's a problem.
That'll
Yeah, I mean, the whole
hurt.
thing, it's like we're looking in a mirror.
Well, worst case, I mean, you could send
Look
this
at
to
your-
us later, right? Like a PDF or a.
Oh, sure, absolutely.
Yeah.
Look at
Slideshow?
your,
Okay.
look at your, go into your settings.
Okay, hold on a second. Yeah.
Give me a little heads up when you're coming to a close on that you have something to work on. And it's okay if you can't, you know, it'll evolve as the day goes on. You'll think of things. But
No, it's showing correctly.
Okay.
No, it's.
You should be able to go into your settings. And it's actually displaying correctly once you do this. It's really bizarre. Well, it might be. That just might be how it, think about how our eyes look, how our eyes, you know, we see everything, we don't see everything like that, you know, it comes in. So, yeah, as long as everybody else is seeing it.
the most important thing is that it takes 30 pounds off. Let's be clear about that.
it does.
Thank you.
Yeah, mad.
Yeah, they paid extra for that in the camera.
I appreciate that. That's real commitment.
Yeah, we try to do it, you know.
Is that too much?
I'm feeling like I'm hearing tongues.
I think it's good.
I think it's fine.
It doesn't make a difference. Oh, wait, no, it did.
Yeah.
I'm gonna allow less
Yeah.
fluorescent lights as possible. I mean, I'm not gonna say
It's like,
this.
it's all, it's.
It's all right. No, no pressure. If you fall asleep, don't worry about it.
I
I'll
can
just give you a
adjust.
gentle.
Well, apparently I've been snoring lately, so, you know, you just be like, no.
We'll just have to.
Okay, I'm gonna have you set that aside for just a second so that we can tell you a little bit about what my understanding is of what you were interested in today and introduce myself a little bit and I want to learn. I have gotten to know a few of you because I've been down here a couple of other times. You have a really strong group. I know that you had, I don't know, 30 people registered. The turnout that you have with us is great. So we're always thrilled to come down here because you always have a good turnout. My name is Megan Mutti. I'm an educator with Family Matters. It's Parent Training and Information Center for the state of Illinois, and every region is required to have one. So I'm the Central Region educator. And there's another parent training center for families who are parenting students, young adults with disabilities up in Chicago. But my focus is Peoria, Champaign, and this whole area. So my understanding, Nicole and I traded a lot of emails back and forth, is that you kind of wanted a combined training. Some focus on IEPs, the process, participation, kind of the entire event, planning for that and all of that. And then you also had some interest in behavioral components. And so what we did is combine several different things. So the one part of this that I need you to kind of ignore is that because we pulled together several different presentations to meet your interests, the formatting is a little bit wonky. So just try to look at that. We have originally scheduled the time from 10 to 2. We will go as long as you're interested. So I'll be shocked if I can hold your interest until 2 o'clock, but I will give it my very best shot. But if you need to leave before then, that's completely fine.
Childcare only holds children for 2 hours, so,
Oh, okay. So we will not go
Just so you
10 to
know.
2 if you have a truck. Well, I'll talk really quickly, but through quite a bit. And I can drive back down again if you want to. So you just kind of let me know what you're interested in when we're done and gaps that you feel like, oh no, I want to learn more about this, and we'll just come back down, okay? Really quickly, I want to introduce Annie. Can you say hi? So this is Annie. She is my daughter, the reason that I teach classes. And she is 18 years old, and she's going to be a senior. She's going to prom next weekend.
All right.
Yeah. So we're going to do a little prom shopping after class. But she comes to these with me partly because she helps me set up, and partly because sometimes we share her story, and it's important that she give permission for that and be a part of that if we can do that. So if you all wouldn't mind really quick introducing yourself, telling me a little bit about your kiddo and why you're here, just so I have a sense of what everybody's interests are as we go through. Can you start over here? I'm going to totally pick on you.
Okay. I'm Christy, and I have a daughter who's 5 and has autism.
Okay. Did we need another training?
Yes. Yeah, last year. He's Lena. I have a son who's 8, and he's in a self-contained class. And he's been transitioning to the regular classroom. And for the most part, he's doing well and somewhat better. One of my concerns is I've been asking the school for their IEP meeting that's coming up at the end of the year if he's moving out of that classroom, because as a mom, I do not want him to do that yet. So I don't feel like he's ready. And nobody is able to answer me if he is, or if that's what they're going to be discussing with us. Because if he moves out of that classroom, he moves away from that school, goes to a different school, and he's never been in the same school. He's been in 9 schools, and he's in 2nd grade. So we'd like to try to keep him in one school at least a little bit longer.
Okay.
With teachers that he knows.
That's definitely something to do.
Okay.
I'm Nicole. My son is 6, and he had a stroke in utero, has cerebral palsy. He has epilepsy and some behavior issues. We're finishing kindergarten, and
Here we are.
yeah, here we are.
My name is Pamela, and my son is 7. He's going to be 8 on Monday, and he is excuse me, finishing up 1st grade high functioning autism.
My name is Jackie. I have a 10-year-old daughter named Isabella. She has been medically diagnosed with autism, moderate to severe anxiety disorder, and ADHD. We've been fighting since kindergarten to have her IEP put back in place. She had one, she did early intervention, but again, I had to fight for that too, so we didn't get in until she was almost 3. And then she had an IEP throughout preschool. She had 3 years of preschool. They took it away for kindergarten, and she has been struggling ever since.
Yeah, they don't, but there's a way to sort of work on why that happened and what needs to change to get it back in place. So we'll work on it.
I'm Amy, and I have 2 boys on the autism spectrum. One is 10 and one is 12. So
I'm Diane. I have a 6-year-old who's in kindergarten. She has apraxia of speech, a little bit of global apraxia, but we're overcoming that pretty well. Suspected like ADHD or something, and extreme anxiety. So very similar. We just lost everything except for speech on her IEP. And as we progress, her behavior is getting worse, which we expected based on some older siblings issues. And she's got like 0 academic interest and just is not picking stuff up. So.
My name is Kim. We have 4 children, 1 with Down syndrome, the other one, my 10-year-old, almost 10, he's 10 in June. He has about 8 diagnoses. You can sum it up in global delays and neurobiological is his primary disorder due to his birth mom's drug use.
Bill, my wife Heather, we have an 8-year-old son, John. He's in 2nd grade. and he has autism.
And ADHD and anxiety. And we haven't had a ton of problems with our school, but we don't know a ton about IEPs. He was in a normal class and then he got separated out. It's been a really rough year for him, so.
He has an IEP in place now.
Yeah, he has one in place. We need to work on a few things, I think.
My name's Catherine. Both my daughters have ADHD. My younger daughter, about to complete 8th grade. She's had a 504 plan for years for ADHD and depression, but this year she started having a lot of anxiety disorder. And my husband and her older daughter also has anxiety disorder, but with her younger daughter, it affects her. She doesn't participate in any extracurriculars. In a couple days this year, she tried to come home from school early. She doesn't track her homework. I stopped doing it for her, and so I keep track and emailing teachers. The grades just plummet.
Okay, so in this room, we have a lot of neurodiversity, so we totally embrace that at Family Matters, and it's something we love talking about, and so we'll do a lot of talking about that today. I do apologize, I'm sitting. I don't usually sit. I like to move around, but I have a little bit of a foot problem, and so my foot, I'll be miserable, and then what kind of prom shopping are we going to be able to do?
Yeah,
so I'm just going to have to stay off of it for now. Megan Mutti.
Mutti.
Yep. So I'm going to go through this, and we can stop at any point. This is what I understood. There was some interest in preparing for an IEP, kind of learning what would happen in what order. Now, keep in mind, if you've done the IEP process several times, there's nothing to say you have to continue that process. There's nothing to say it has to keep looking like this. Now, anybody who's heard me talk about IEPs before will have heard me say that I really don't like the process at all. I think it's extremely difficult on families and students, unnecessarily so. And I think there's some other ways that you can go about an IEP. The legal definition of going through that process is what it is. The kind of practical process that we use, I don't think it's terribly effective for families. But it takes a little bit of confidence to go in and say, hey, I want to do this differently. I want it to look differently this time, because last time it didn't feel really great. It does not feel great as a family to walk into a room full of professionals staring at you and wanting to discuss, for the most part, your child's deficits. That is not a great feeling. Talk about present levels of performance, keeping in mind that we cannot make goals that are effective if we don't really have a good handle on what your child is doing right now and how they're performing right now, and that sometimes is a weakness within IEPs. Deciding if you need behavioral supports and using appropriate assessments to get the supports that you need. This definitely isn't. A lot of times when I have families who are very frustrated with the process, this is the area where they're very frustrated. So some of the academic goals are built pretty effectively, but this behavioral piece is extremely frustrating. So I'm going to give you some ideas and tools, and you can sort of pick and choose what would work best for you and your family. Developing a positive behavioral intervention plan, and we'll talk more about that. Setting goals, and then determining where services should be received. Specifically what you talked about. So the first thing, and remember, this is not cookie cutter. So all of you will not take the process that I give you today and go, yeah, that's going to work great, and do it. There's going to be bits and pieces you're going to think, yeah, I want to do that. I have no interest in that, and that's completely fine. You just pull what is useful to you. But this, I think, really is important for everybody to do. Before an IEP meeting, pull all of your child's educational records. And it's often not something that you can walk into school and get and walk out with. So sometimes it takes a little bit of time to get it printed and get it. So think ahead a few weeks if you want to do this. But it really can give you some good insight into what the school is seeing, and it can help you sort of meet them in the middle with what you're concerned with and how you want things addressed. It helps you not be surprised.
Are all of these records located at the school, or are they located like in a district building?
It depends on your district.
Okay.
It depends on your district. So most of the time you can get them from the school regardless of where they're located.
So we would just contact the school and then they would tell us where to go from there?
Yeah, and they would have you fill out a request for records for.
Okay.
Okay.
I just want to be prepared, some records, they will not print for you to take with you if you want to see like their temperature. There's more than one file that the school districts keep. So there's a permanent file, a temporary file, and then like a behavioral file, or, you know, the temporary file and the behavioral file, usually they will not copy that and send with you. You have to go to the office and sit there and go through it.
And I will be honest, if you take the time to do that, that does send a message that I want all the information that I need moving forward. So it's a good idea to do it. It's not always a pleasant experience.
No.
Okay. This is kind of talking through what you need to make sure. So after you've reviewed those records, I would want you to be able to speak to these things throughout the records, okay? Your child's strengths, their learning style, sort of what seems to work for them, what doesn't work for them. You know, it's pretty basic, some of it. So
I'm so sorry. The race was in our neighborhood.
No, you're totally fine. Just come on in. You don't want to sit right here? No, you're fine. You sit back there. It's your call, whatever you want to do. I'll catch you up on paperwork here. So when I talk about learning style, you want some of the basics, you know, you all can probably identify this for yourself. You know, I don't learn, you know, if Diane explained to me how to do this thing verbally, I'd probably shake my head, yeah, got it. And 5 minutes later, I'd say, I'm going to have you show me that again, because I just don't absorb stuff like that. Now, if you walk me hand over hand through it and I did it, then I would be able to do it. So you want to know some of those things about your child. What really helps them learn? Be careful that you're not absorbing like just what they're able to go through the process of. I mean, many kids can sit quietly in a classroom for a certain period of time and give the impression that they're learning, but that doesn't really mean that they're absorbing that. So really think through at home, you know, when you're cooking, you know, when you're reading a book, when you're teaching your child how to put away their laundry, whatever it is, how do they learn best? Because that's going to be a key to them having some success in the school environment. And honestly, there's a lot of kids at school, and sometimes this piece gets lost in the IEP, and unless you bring it to them, they're not going to think 100% through this. Present levels, we want to know what they're doing well and where their gaps are. You need to sort of know right now where they're at. Areas of concern, this is part of the reason I had you write this all down, because though my guess is as you're driving down the street, this stuff's popping in your head all the time. You're thinking, oh, I'm really worried about this. We need to address this, or what are we going to do about this? Or, oh my gosh, she surprised me today. She was so awesome at this. And you're thinking about it, but then you pull into home and it's gone. And so you really want to have that in the front of your head when you go into the IEP meeting, all those things. What kind of measurable goals we can put forth? Accommodation, supports and services. Everybody know the difference between accommodation and modification? No. Okay, so this is important. In accommodation, a modification means we're going to change what you learn. An accommodation means we're going to do something to support you in learning what everybody else is learning. So we're going to give you more time. We are going to give you a scribe to write your answers down so that you don't have to do that, because maybe that process is difficult for you. But you're going to take the same tests. You're going to have the same assignments. A modification means we're going to have you, I'm going to give you the same math paper everybody else gets, but I'm going to cross out every other one, because it takes you longer and that would be overwhelming to you. You're going to do every other problem. Or I'm going to have everybody else write 4 paragraphs and I'm going to have you write 1 paragraph. You always want to start with accommodations and then move to modifications. Does that make sense? So you want to give your child every support they would need to be able to do the work at the level everyone else is doing. But if that is too much for them and we want them to have success and continue to learn and grow, progress, then we start making some modifications, small ones that will grow if your child's needs grow. Does that make sense? So if you're just talking about time or tools, using an iPad to read something, those are all accommodations. It's not until we start changing content that is modification. And that'll be important in the IEP. How they progress over time, their test scores, what kind of supports and services you need. So it's really important to think beyond the school day. It's completely okay to use your IEP meeting to also talk about transportation, to talk about extracurricular activities. Your child has a right to be fully included at the school in the entire range of services that the school offers to every other student. And sometimes those IEP meetings are so overwhelming and we're just talking about, you know, math. that we forget, like, hey, actually your child has an interest in chorus, and right now we're not doing anything to include them in chorus. Okay, so think about that. We have a good example right now in our area is we opened up a separate school, for better or worse, but a lot of students with, I would say, more severe needs tend to go to this school. Well, it was, as you all can imagine, sitting here, a little bit of a hot button. Should the district embrace this philosophy? Should the district not embrace this philosophy? But there were some parents who felt pretty strongly that they wanted access to this very specialized program and have honestly been very happy. I've heard that they were happy. But 8th grade graduation is coming up, and one of the parents said, well, what are we going to do about graduation? And the district just hadn't thought that through at all. Just those kids weren't going to participate in graduation. They just totally forgot. It wasn't that they didn't want them to participate. It was just nobody was thinking about it. They were completely left off this really critical and important, milestone. So ultimately they are participating in graduation, as you might imagine, but those things matter. And then placement considerations, where your child will receive services, okay? And that's really, always when you go into that IEP meeting, in your brain, start with the placement that is the most open. So we want to work backwards. You don't want to start with a closed environment. Okay, your situation is a little bit different because you're already in that environment. But you don't want to start from a closed environment and prove why you get at least a less restrictive environment, because that's not how it works. The school has to prove the child needs a less restrictive environment. So we assume that children are in a regular general ed classroom with all the supports that they need to be successful. And there's a lot of evidence, a lot of overwhelming evidence to say that students who have access to the general ed environment with appropriate supports long-term do much better than if they're in a closed environment. So knowing what the research says, it's important to seek that out.
So like with my kiddo, and I know she's got a kiddo who's kind of, John's been secluded a bit. He's been pulled out of his regular class. It was supposed to be per month. It's 6 months now. We're trying to figure out what next year's going to look like. And he's been more successful, but some of the things have not changed.
Okay.
So how do we know when, like, I think it would be good for him to be in the classroom with more supports and not separated out. I don't know what that's supposed to look like. I don't know what I'm allowed to ask for. You know what I mean?
Okay.
Like,
yes. Which I'll be honest is common. So I don't know what to ask for. I'm waiting for you to offer, right? I'm waiting for you as a school to offer the choices to me. So what I encourage you today is, don't worry about what the school's gonna offer. You go in there with what you think will work best for him, and you will sort of navigate your way through a path where you end up with an answer. So you might say, I'm trying to think of a good example of this. I'm going to use extracurricular because this is a big issue in our life, and it's fresh in my mind. So your child, let's say he wants to play on the basketball team. Okay, so that's what you go in with. Not how do you make him, how does the school accommodate that? He wants to play on the basketball team, what are we going to do? And they'll say probably, we just don't really, we've never done that before. We don't know how to help him have success on the basketball team. And you have to try out for the basketball team and blah, 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 you have to jump through these hoops to do it. What we'll come back to is, well, I hear what you're saying. You've never done it before. So he wants to play on the basketball team. So let's talk about how we're going to get to that point. He wants to spend most of his day in the general ed classroom, and I believe he can have success in there. So what are we going to do to make that happen? And let them sort of bring you some choices and answers. So kind of what we did here in a very mini way, just make a list of things that you want to address in the IEP meeting. This is a sample list of things that you might want to test. Sensory issues. And these are things that, as a parent, you may only know this. Other people, the school may not have picked up on this, right? So last night, am I allowed to talk about the fan, Annie? Can I give that example? The fan. So last night, Annie asked me to turn the fan off in my room. And I said, I'm not turning the fan off in my room, I'm hot. And you're not even in my room, so you're in your room. And she said, well, but I'll know that it's on, and that will bother me. Well, I know that kind of stuff happens in the school environment too, right? No, she didn't win that, right? The fans stayed on. but it was a little insight into like what kind of things, sometimes when we say your child is very distractible, what is distracting to them? And sometimes it's just everything that's happening in their brain, but sometimes it's those fluorescent lights, or it's the fact that your teacher leaves the door open all the time and they're hearing all of that. But you're not going to know that, right? So you're going to say, my child just can't attend to anything. But if you sat for 3 or 4 hours in the classroom, you might go, oh, well, now I see what's distracting to him. Not that the teacher's doing anything wrong. It's just that the environment might be overstimulated to them. And if you made a few modifications in the environment, you might see a significant shift, right? Go ahead.
Sorry. So we, probably like the last year or so, we've been experiencing some sensory issues in stemming from our son. And at the, we had him tested in January for ADHD or spectrum, and he did test positive for being on the spectrum, high functioning, but because of the stroke, we're not really sure if it's behavior issues with the stroke or if he actually is autistic or not, so we won't know until he gets older. But the sensory issues are very real, and so they have told us that he doesn't do any of those at school. And I'm like, you mean to tell me he doesn't dance and sing and turn the light switches on and off, or stare at the wall, or like he loves to read things on the wall, and like he can't go past it until he's read the sign that's on the wall. Or he wants to count all of the lights in the hallway, and he keeps going until he counts the lights in the hallway. So when he's walking, they'll be like, well, he's veering to the left because that's his dominant side. I'm like, he's veering to the left because he's staring at the lights in the hallway. Right. Like, that's what he's doing. So, I mean, it's not that they're not recognizing him, and maybe, I don't know, I'm not there all day long. It's just really hard for me to believe that he's not doing any of this sensory stuff. I mean, I will say, when he does come home from school, we STEM for a good 20 or 30 minutes after school. Okay. So he may hold that in for 6 hours. Right. But, you know, so my question to you is, one, I'm assuming they're telling the truth. You know, I'm assuming they would say, yes, he does this. And how do you get services for something that he doesn't necessarily do in school? Because with IEP, you know, it has to be educational. So, like, you know what I'm saying?
That's a tough one.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of layers to it.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I would say a lot of like what we deal with, yes, we deal with at home, and so we see the outbursts and rages at home, and we can track them. So I don't know if that's a big piece of like why I really need a classroom, because the teacher understands. They can see that he's being triggered, and she can tell me that and warn me.
Okay.
That's a big piece of why I'm trying to keep him where he needs to be.
Because things are working, it sounds like, in that classroom. So a couple pieces. One, there used to be this program, I don't know if it's still in place, called the Fly on the Wall. And they would have someone come in and just watch your child's day, you know, just watch everything that's happening. It's better, I think, that somebody that doesn't know your child, that your child isn't paying attention to, has the opportunity to do that versus mom or dad or whoever else, because you know, right? Like, they know you're there.
And when I go to the classroom for like a holiday party or a field trip, he does all of the things that he does at home because I'm there.
Sure, that makes sense.
So it's almost like he's comfortable, now he can do it.
Right.
But when I'm not there, they say that it's not happening. So,
and to be honest, if it was happening to the point that it was distracting or somehow interfering with his learning, I think they'd say so.
I agree.
Because they need to do something to alter it. And you may be right. I mean, I hear over and over exactly what you're saying. The kids hold in that, which requires a certain degree of self-control.
I don't know.
All of us can imagine how much self-control that takes.
I mean, from a 6-year-old, that's, I don't understand. Like,
yeah. But that speaks to sort of social awareness too, of like, I don't want to, shouldn't, or cannot do this. It would not be okay to do this in the classroom, or the kids are going to look at me, or that I'm going to get in trouble, or whatever. And so that's a huge strength, really.
Right. No,
but it's also a stressor.
Yeah.
It's also how much energy is this poor kid putting out?
Right. Right.
Well,
and
then he's also learning to keep it all in and not be himself. So then, you know, his friends are not really seeing, because the first time I went to the classroom and he started doing all the stemming, it was like, I think it was for like the Halloween party or something. And all of the kids came up to me, they're like, what's Maxwell doing? Is he singing? Is he clapping? He never does this. You know, like it was a whole other side of Maxwell that they hadn't shown, you know.
The one thing that I think you could,
I'm sorry?
What does stemming mean?
So stemming is a way of them releasing energy that they have or of feelings. So a lot of autistic kids will like flap or jump, rock. Okay. Maxwell sings and claps, and because he can't really clap with his right hand, he claps like this. So he makes up songs himself. Right now, we're really hooked on Old MacDonald. A lot of Old MacDonald.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot.
Yeah, very perceptive about songs.
Very, yeah. So, yeah, so it's just a way of them to like release built up energy, and they can't use their words to explain. So it's a behavior
Yeah,
thing,
which
but
we
also
would expect
social.
it is totally normal part of being on the spectrum. But one thing they might want to offer to him is, hey, it looks like sometimes being able to, for example, read all the words on the wall or count the lights or whatever it is,
right.
Really helps you calm down. If you need 10 minutes every day to do that, or you need 3 breaks, you just need to tell me, and I'm going to give you a break to go do that.
Yeah.
And it just gives him an opportunity. Now, he may say, like that, I'm not comfortable with that, but
we did tell the school, like, they were like, yeah, we'll give him breaks, no problem. He goes to Carrie Busey, so they have like a sensory room and all of this stuff, it's really great. But they're like, well, he doesn't tell us. And I said, well, he's also speech delayed. So maybe we should just build him into his day
and see what happens. He'll tell you if he doesn't want them.
Right.
He'll somehow let you know that.
Right.
That's not cool. Yeah.
So, I mean, that's one of the things where, they haven't been doing them. I mean, it's like written in the IEP, but they haven't necessarily they've been asking him, and he'll be like, no, but it's the same thing as, in the IEP it's written that they're supposed to give me monthly updates, and they don't do that either. But also they have like a bajillion kids that they see, and I mean, I understand, I mean, I'm not trying to be, crazy, but I did find the email and I'm like, I just need to know what's going on,
Yeah, and we can talk about some ideas.
Yeah.
About when something, so if it's something that's not being met, that you're kind of like, it's not going to make a huge difference in my child's day. I feel okay. I really feel strongly about the idea of picking your battles, because there are going to be some battles. You are going to have to dig in on a few things that are critical to your child's success. That's why you don't want to dig in on the things that aren't, because you're going to spin your wheels, and those relationships are so critical. So we'll talk more about it as we go through. But here, just sort of thinking through communication notebook, extended school year, using the bathroom for a lot of people is an issue. So talking about that. Now, what you don't want to do is you take all the time to go through these records, you make your list, you're ready to go, but then you don't share your information. So I don't want you going into an IEP meeting kind of like this, like with your lists and your things that are important to you, but you're afraid to share, or you're sort of ready to drop a bomb in the middle of the IEP meeting.
Can I see the previous screen again? Because I can't read this.
There you go.
Oh, thank you.
So think about that. And usually what I recommend is 5 to 7 days before an IEP, shoot off your list of concerns and the things you want to address in the IEP meeting, your agenda. Okay. Ask then for them to also share their draft IEP goals so that you have an opportunity to get them. That is a reasonable request.
You usually get them about 2 days before.
Yeah, that would be a win. I'd say 2 days.
Maybe 24 hours.
Yeah.
Have you run into schools that have a quote district policy to not provide draft IEPs?
Well, I suppose in theory they don't have to provide draft IEP goals. Part of that can go back to like, we don't want them to develop the IEP. That's the whole point of the IEP is a partnership document. But if you're given the draft IEP goals and something totally off the mark, then you can say like, actually, this really isn't something. A good example is, I don't know how many years we had shoe tying on the IEP. Well, how many years do you work on that before you go, that's what Velcro shoes are for. It's Birkenstocks. That's what they're for.
Oh, they have zipper shoes now.
Oh, yes. They even have the ones that do them themselves.
Billy Footwear. They zip all the way open. Put the foot in, zip it all the way closed.
So sort of think about that.
Orthotics.
Yeah,
or
that's awesome.
IFOs. My son has an IFO. So.
Go ahead.
The school that we go to has a unique grading system. it's not your typical A, B, C, D type of system, like, we go here and C.
Oh, yeah.
I don't understand it at all, to be able to tell you, like, when I met with the teacher for our, academic review, I was sitting there going, I don't know what that, I even told her, I don't know what that means. Can you relay that to me? So when they give me this stuff, I still don't know where he's at.
Okay.
And I'd be there like, he's doing fine. You really don't need to worry about it.
Okay. So there are some parents who would hear that and they would say, okay,
Yeah,
right? And that's maybe what they're used to. But you absolutely have the right to understand the grading system at the school, and you certainly can't participate in decisions for them if you don't understand it in the way that you want to. So even if it means, hey, I'm coming in for an hour, or I'm organizing a parent group, we're all coming in, we need you to explain the grading system so that we can work on it at home. You need to be able to understand that. That's not a reasonable. I get how I get where the school, it's just so it's much easier to say everything's great, we're all good. But that's not really how the system's built. You have a right to understand that, and you can't participate if you don't.
Exactly. I'm like, I don't know how to write an IEP.
They're probably at the IEP meeting, there's so much going on too, that they don't feel like they can share that information at that time, so.
You can even say, give me the website where that type of grading system is explained so that I can read through it.
It's not necessarily only for the IEP, you also obviously want to help them at home, so if he's struggling with something, like you're a proactive parent, you just want to do, and that's why I wanted the monthly updates, because I'm like, where is he with speech? Because he clearly does different things at home, like he speaks more than he does at school, so maybe we can talk to him, maybe we can encourage him, see what he's actually understanding, and that's clearly what you want to do as well, so.
And I'll be honest with you, a lot of this is just setting a relationship tone. As we're full partners, and I need to understand everything, and I'm gonna help you understand what happens at home. And that's what we're both gonna bring to the table, and that's how we operate. We won't always see eye to eye, we won't always agree, but we're both gonna be fully open about what our concerns are as we go through this. So this is a very minor thing, but I've had some parents where it becomes very frustrating. You request kind of this IEP meeting, you're gonna be provided with a written notice of your IEP, and meetings are to be held at a mutually agreeable time, okay? This, again, to me, is not something to dig out on. I've had some parents who are just like, they want to meet at, this time, and I cannot meet at this time. That's okay to reschedule it, but if it's, I need you to meet at 6 p.m. and I want the whole team there at 6 p.m., I'm going to be honest with you, I don't think it's probably worth the energy that's not your battle. Yep, somebody probably could put forth an argument about why that battle's okay. I just think you're going to have a lot more significant things to deal with. Pick your battles. So this will be, now some of this is review for those of you who are pretty seasoned IEP people. So we'll be there, your child when appropriate. I encourage you to have your child there as soon as possible. So they don't have to participate, they don't have to stay the whole time, but they have the right to know that this meeting is about their success and their experience. So it's important to them to know, and then that'll just start to become the norm for them. I don't think you talked to your IEP until your freshman year, right? Yeah. So now Annie runs her IEP meetings with an iPad. She doesn't tend to share vocally, but she does run the meeting with an iPad that she has, sort of developed ahead of time with all of her goals and things at work and things she wants to do the next year. Now, I don't expect an 8-year-old to do that. But you may be able to work at home with your child who's 6 and develop a paper, a handout that they can give to all of the people at the table to talk about what's gone well that year and what hasn't, or what their interests are, or whatever. But giving them some control over, like, hey, we think it's uncomfortable as parents. You can imagine as a student, it's pretty uncomfortable to have everybody sitting around talking about you. So the quicker you can get them engaged and involved and participating, the less that becomes that feeling for them. But this is who will be there. Regular education teacher, whoever that regular education teacher is, please make sure it's somebody that would actually be working with your child, not just a check off. So, I still remember years ago where IEP meeting, this man was sitting there and I couldn't figure out why he was sitting there. Yeah, it was a science teacher. Yeah.
So I just wanted to suggest too, like for mine, his IEP is May 11th. Okay, school is out the 22nd.
Okay.
So first grade's over, and so there's really, it's great she's going to be there as far as like goals or whatever. But I requested that his 2nd grade teacher be in there because she's the one that's going to be really dealing with the goals. And so my suggestion is to do this.
That's huge. That's such a great idea.
So,
And
and
then
they're fine with
finding out who
it.
your son's second grade teacher is before everybody else does.
I am.
And our
I'm just
annual,
kidding.
and our annual,
I am, but
you know, our annual IEPs, both teams are there, the outgoing and the incoming.
Oh, that's great.
So if
That's great.
you're, especially if you're moving to a new building, like you have a K2 building and then 3, 5. If you're, you know, especially the 2 to 3 is really important that incoming ones come and the outgoing ones, everything, speech, whatever your child whatever services your child gets, their their colleague that's gonna come in and do their job the next year is also there.
Now, I'll be honest, that is not necessarily the norm, so that's something you'll have to advocate for. If you won't have, I don't think you'll have any trouble getting the teacher for next year there. If you do,
well, the only thing is that they don't
Sometimes
have
they
the
don't
placements
know.
made yet. So that's the only time that you wouldn't be able to get, which they were still working on for me, but luckily they were like, okay, we have it pretty much narrowed down. So they were very, very cooperative about it. Like they did their best.
that's a huge, I mean, that's, to have that person there and participating, that's
Yes.
huge.
So has anybody ever had like a third, like the school psychologist or somebody come up to you saying that they want to take control of your child's health needs?
Like take power of attorney?
No, it sounds like power of attorney, right? It sounds like power of attorney, but they came in saying, if you fill out these paperwork, we'll talk to the doctor for you.
Oh, so they're giving you, they want access to talk to the doctor and share information and.
Yeah,
Right.
no,
And I'm like, no,
yeah.
it's for HIPAA. And I said that to them.
Did they explain why they wanted that access?
Yes, in a way, they told me I'm stupid. Yeah. You see my color of skin, I'm supposed to not understand English or how school policy works. Sorry. But that's why I came. I had to.
I would be
have to
very
express
reticent to
that.
sign that unless there was a legitimate reason.
I know, and we're having issues with so she gets headaches. Now you add the allergy season and her having severe headaches. And they're putting her on social probation because she was absent. And even the doctor notes say, not the date she was absent, but saying, yeah, this kid is having severe allergies. And I'm sitting here at home going, okay, you're having severe allergies. You have dyslexia. And focusing is going to be difficult for you today, honey. I'm not going to have you go to school today. So I keep her home. The attendance secretary wants the doctor to write, she was absent on this specific date because she had this. I'm like, she can't do that. The doctor has seen her for this day. She doesn't want to miss school because then she gets behind, right? She's an IEP child. And so I'm like, sitting here going, you're not really helping putting the child on social probation because you're sick for reasons that the doctor is giving you. But you want these dates put on there, which is not the doctor's job. The doctor's job is to only say, yeah, you're sick. You know, here's what to do. She can't say, you're going to be the period of time, because this is allergy season. Exactly, and that's in her 504 and in her IEP to say that the child is going to have.
I would say maybe we need to write it in IEP in a different, so that everybody's interpreting it the same way.
Well, I'm wondering why she's not interpreting. She did this for my other child.
Did you bring a copy of it? Yeah.
Well, I haven't talked to, well, I shouldn't say that. I have talked to her on the phone, and the first thing she usually tells me is, she's basically belligerent. She'll tell me, I'm not going to start this conversation with you yelling at me. And I'm like, I'm not yelling at you.
Who is this?
This is Central High School.
Oh, but it's like.
Oh, she's Central's, Central's attendance secretary.
Okay. Let me think about this.
Yeah.
Before you leave today, look at how it's actually written in the IEP, because we may be able to come up with a plan that works better. That you're not running into that. But before I signed over something like that, I think I would talk to an attorney. That's my advice on that.
Before I do what?
Before I sign something, giving them access to your
Well,
health records,
I talked to the doctor. You know, like I talked to her. She's like, and I talked to the nurse, and they're like, you're not supposed to. I mean, this is her health, and they shouldn't be, you're doing everything it's supposed to do without giving them access to every health.
Now, you could invite your pediatrician to come to an IEP meeting where they could provide you some support.
And
How much are they going to
how,
charge for that?
exactly, you know.
Sorry. No, I know, you're right, you're right.
So I was asked to sign papers for them to talk to my daughter's psychiatrist. And I thought, well, I have to prove to them that she has these conditions she's been diagnosed with, so I should sign it, right? But maybe not.
You can rescind that. You can rescind that. And the other thing is, the way you can prove those is you can bring documentation that you're comfortable with from the provider that lists out,
Letters.
then that's.
Yeah.
But then I had to threaten to, they didn't give me the meeting that I thought it was at the end. It was, they called an RTI meeting at the end. I said, well, so this isn't gonna lead to a case study? And they said, oh no, her grades are too good. And so then I talked to my sister who's a social worker, and she told me how to use the right language, and I threatened to report them to ISB, the Illinois State Board of Education. And they responded within an hour and got them a meeting. But they won't work with me unless they threaten.
Yeah, well,
Which I hate to hear that is not ideal.
we had to go independent to fund, because she was, the same thing.
Yeah.
That she was successful, but they're telling me that she's not being able to read. And I'm like, well, that's because there's an issue, and let me explain to you. But instead I get harassed in the hallway, being told that I am, obviously belligerent, obviously I don't know what I'm talking about, and obviously, you know, I don't know how this system works, and I'm like, I went through the system myself, so stop making assumptions about me just because, you know, the harassment that people get advocating for their child's needs. They need to look at how they're presenting themselves and the educational environment.
We can talk a little bit about evals and how evals work, and how to get what you need through an evaluation. And sometimes it is an independent evaluation to get what you need, but we'll get to that. There's going to be a school representative. Basically, there has to be somebody at the table who can make decisions and spend money. That's the best way to put it. They can make decisions about how they're going to allocate funding for specific services. So a good example would be if you are there and you're going to ask for summer school, extended school year for your child, there has to be somebody at the table who can make a decision about whether or not that's appropriate. If you're going to ask for a specific type of tutoring, if you're going to ask for, I recently was working closely with a family who was asking for a curriculum, for the purchase of a curriculum for their child who had a specific reading concern that this curriculum addressed. You can imagine sort of the struggle of that and the position that family found themselves in. So you want somebody there who can really evaluate and talk through those types of expenditures. Somebody that can evaluate results. The number of families who have difficult experiences in IEP meetings with results being given to them that they weren't prepared to hear. I'm sure all of you have a story of that. So it is reasonable, and I usually recommend that you ask to meet with the school psychologist prior to the meeting to review all of the results, because no parent wants to have that experience where they're in that meeting and that's the first time they get difficult information about their child, or maybe even information they disagree with. So always ask for a review. If he, is right then you're going to run into trouble. So you want to request it to be done ahead of time, and not that it can be evaluated at the meeting. Okay?
You're going to ask me why I want to see it ahead of time. So I just
because in the meeting you would like not to be surprised in the meeting, okay, and you'd like to be able to participate in the discussion. And if you're getting difficult information in the meeting, you're trying to process it, you can't participate.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's what I don't like about this. Okay.
There's a lot not to like. So developing the IEP, you want the overarching question is what has to be accomplished and in what order of steps. So there's a form in here. You guys, we're not going to spend a ton of time on this because I think we get caught up in this and not get through some of the better stuff. But I want you to at least have it. It looks like this. The good thing about this is once we write all over it, your child's stuff all over it, it's harder to read through it and figure out what you're writing on. So, but we're going to really quickly run through this.
Is this the Illinois State Board of Education one?
Yes.
Right.
So first off, their signatures, they'll pass it around, everybody signs. That does not mean that you're agreeing to what's in the IEP, okay? Does not mean that. All it means is you were there. okay? And that can be confusing.
There's so many places to sign these.
There are.
It's like buying a house,
Yeah.
kind of, when you sign an
It
IEP.
feels a little bit
A little
like that,
bit.
yeah. Evaluation results will be included and critically, parent input is part of that evaluation. So you need to make sure that you were asked and participated at a high level in the evaluation process. Another reason why you shouldn't, there's no reason that you're completely surprised, because you're gonna have had a discussion with the provider, because you're gonna participate in the evaluation. If you didn't, then that's a bigger problem. And they need to identify strengths and deficits, not just deficits. Now, I think a lot of schools have gotten pretty good at that. A good way to start this is my recommendation, is as soon as everybody sits down at the meeting, you all go around and introduce yourselves. Don't skip that step. And then you say, before we even get started today, I want you to talk, everybody to share one positive thing about this child. That's where we're gonna start. Everybody goes around the room and shares one positive thing. Every child has a zillion positive things, but it sets off just the meeting on, we're gonna focus on this. And that can be uncomfortable as a parent, but that's a reasonable thing to ask for, and you're coming at it from, hey, relationship building aspects. So don't be afraid to do that.
I think it's easier too for your kids if they're there.
Oh, totally. So much easier. Yes, I agree completely. How great does it feel like we're meeting because you're doing so great in so many areas and you have so many strengths?
That's how we actually wrap that for our kids. Like, this is our meeting to talk about how great you have done at school.
Oh, that's awesome.
And if there's any areas that we want to work on, we can certainly do that. But we're here to talk about how great you are.
That is awesome. Good. Now, if we could just box that up and send it out to everyone. Now, eligibility determination, that really, so parents really sometimes get really hung up on that eligibility determination. Is your child eligible and under what category they're eligible? I wouldn't spend as much time on what category they're eligible in that you really focus on what services they need. So that's what you're focused on. Who cares what category it is, as long as the services they get matter. Go ahead.
Okay, unless you're in a situation where the school is insisting on ED as their eligibility requirement. And the reason that schools insist on that is because if they're looking further ahead and they want to place that child out of district into another type of school, a lot of those schools will not accept children unless they have that eligibility in their IEP. And that becomes a problem if you disagree with that.
And when they say, oftentimes it becomes a discussion. This is, maybe again, do we label the eligibility under autism or other health impairment? So both of these would be reasonable things for you guys, and several. There are sometimes some implications for getting services that are specific to autism or specific to dyslexia that it becomes a little bit more of an issue. So you want to talk through this is the question. Tell me about the benefits or the drawbacks to getting eligible under that specific criteria. And just ask that question. It's a completely reasonable thing. You want to go through the strengths and the gaps that you're trying to fill, okay? And this just lists through some of the things that are critically important: social skills, independent functioning, vocational skills, motor skills, language, all the things that you all spend a lot of time thinking about. Now, within this is really important, which is why it's green and red. There's something in there where you can put your educational concerns and input. So make certain that that's included. Now, a lot of times you'll notice there'll be a note taker at the table who's filling out, as you're saying things, they're filling stuff out. And when you get a copy of it, it should read through it and make sure that actually says what I wanted it to say. And that's an official part of the record, okay? Another thing I don't think parents realize is, we've talked about this before, I think in another training here, you can request things that support the staff to better work with your child. So if you know, for example, that your child needs a teacher who has a strong background in, throw something out there, guys. Apraxia. Then, and there's a training happening Thursday, and you'd like your teacher to go to that, it's reasonable to check. I would like further teacher training on apraxia, and hey, hand them the flyer and say, this is a great one, it's right down the street, could she go to that? Better yet, could she and I go together? but always sort of have in the back of your mind, what would you ask for if you could? Transition starts officially at 14 and a half. I think it really actually starts around 11. It should start around 11 if you start thinking this through. But for the purpose of an IEP meeting, 14 and a half. At this point, your child essentially is required to be a part of the IEP. Certainly they don't need to be there the whole time if that's your preference or your child's preference, but they need to be participating at a much higher level. We're talking about future planning for them and what that's going to look like. And obviously it's their future and their input. So you want to think about creative ways that you can get their input if participating verbally in the meeting is difficult. So think about that. They'll do some more extensive testing on your child's interests, vocational interests at that time. I wouldn't get too worried about that. The process that they go through. I think we all know that 14-year-olds change their mind pretty quickly about what they want to do.
My daughter's currently too anxious to be in a meeting like that.
Okay.
So I wouldn't know. I mean, they didn't make her because she's in 8th grade, but in high school, I don't know if they're going to push.
They'll strongly encourage her, but if she cannot do it, she cannot do it. And the other thing that might talk to her about, would you be okay? What if we FaceTimed you in? So you didn't have to be in it, but you could still hear what's happening and you could speak up if you wanted to. Or you just want to do a page, I always call it a student resume, but a resume about your experiences this year that we can hand out. And you don't have to be in there, but in there you're going to address, what things help your anxiety, what things hurt your anxiety in the school system so that they understand it better.
She's anxious about cameras too, but
sure.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. This you keep talking about these different sections. I keep trying to find it in here.
I know, I found this, I had the same thing. I'm not sure if they didn't put the entire thing in there.
They didn't. This is only the functional and behavioral.
I'll send it to you.
So
I'm like, where's my check boxes?
Actually, I put a link, I put a link to the document in our Facebook conversation. So if you see the event on Facebook, like in See You Able, I put a link to the ISB
Oh, thank
document.
You guys, this is like the best training ever.
So I have a timing is everything in high school, warning you guys because we've done this now twice. And I think I would prefer her to be able to go. But if they schedule it, like once they schedule it during a chemistry class, she doesn't want to miss chemistry. She's not doing well in chemistry. She's getting straight A's, but in chemistry. Okay.
I didn't get straight A's in chemistry.
Yeah, but it's disappointing because if they would do it at a time where she can come.
So it's always okay for you to ask. Just ask to have it rescheduled. It's completely legitimate. Just say, she's not able to make this chemistry, just like you might not be able to step out of a work meeting at a certain time. So we're gonna need that rescheduled for a time when and give them a couple classes you'd be comfortable missing.
If we have 2 more years, I just want to make sure that in these next 2 years, I would prefer you even have 2 a year, one from the first semester, because you teachers change.
You can do an IEP meeting, and then you can reconvene your IEP meeting. And I encourage you, if you're going to do that, to have some specific concerns that you want to address in that second meeting. Or, we're going to do a quick evaluation of how the year's going. Any changes that have to be
But
made.
not all of our teachers come to the meeting. Does that make sense? Not of all our teachers.
Right. In high school, they don't.
They don't.
Yeah.
And so it makes it like, I feel like I should double and go with, her going to the teachers and saying, okay, I know you didn't come to this. Here's my info.
I think that's completely okay.
I want to do it.
The other thing you could do is invite the teachers, invite all the teachers yourself. I have my IEP meeting, even if you can come for 10 minutes, that'd be great. And a lot of times teachers will try to work that out. Obviously, leaving the classroom in high school is a big challenge.
Very challenging.
But it's completely legitimate to ask that, so don't be afraid to ask that. And it coming from you is powerful. Okay.
Well, that's why I brought her. I was like, I want her for the next 2 months to be able to go to the teachers themselves
to do it.
And say, okay, I know you can't come to the meeting, but I'm going to sit down and talk to you about what my needs are in class.
We'll just schedule a meeting for the end of today,
3:00.
3 o'clock. And they have to be there till 4 o'clock every day anyway.
Yeah, but a lot of the teachers are doing exactly what she does after school. She's going and talking to all of her teachers, trying to catch up on what they didn't understand.
If they know,
They won't be doing
now,
it
they'll schedule it. They'll do it. It kind of comes back to the whole thing of don't be afraid to ask for anything. That's a completely reasonable thing. So, functional behavioral assessment. If a student needs a behavioral intervention plan, this is how we're going to get there. Okay, a functional behavioral assessment. Now, this is going to get into some of the things that some of you have requested to talk about related to behavior. So, a functional assessment is, we want to know how your child sort of is operating throughout the school day, what problem areas there are, what problems are there at home in terms of behavior that you want to address that might sort of overlap. If the team is not able to provide the data that you need, or your child is being repeatedly disciplined for problems, this is what you need to do. You need to request a functional behavioral assessment, okay? So if you find, hey, I'm getting a call, I can't tell you the number of parents who will tell me, like, I'll look at the phone, I know it's school, I don't want to pick it up, because I know it's going to be something bad. I had a parent tell me the other day that every time the school calls, they would say to her, everything's okay, like before they'd say anything else, because she was so afraid that she was going to get bad news or something isn't going well. So think about, are you consistently either getting notes at home that spell out behaviors that are problematic? Are you constantly hearing that kind of thing? Is your child telling you they're getting in trouble a lot? You might want to consider this. I think this is an excellent intervention. If I had my way, every child would have access to this, because I think it helps describe why certain behaviors are happening. And I do think we sometimes forget to look at behavior for what it is, which is communication. So who conducts it? Psychologist, social worker, behavior specialist. I would like everybody to have access to a BCBA, which is a behavior analyst, but they're very few and far between and can be expensive to utilize. So my experience is most schools rely on their social worker or school psychologist to do these, okay? It's in the classroom and other student environments, which is really important. So you're only gonna get a little glimpse inside a classroom, but what's happening in the lunchroom, what's happening in the hallway, what's happening at recess, what's happening on the bus, that's gonna give you like a much fuller picture. So you want that assessment to happen in different arenas throughout the school day. And this is really important, which is why I underlined it. It has to be over multiple days and times. If you just do one day, it's one day.
Yeah.
That's all it is. That's like one day. I act very differently sometimes when I'm super grumpy or hungry or whatever. So that isn't really going to give you the information that you need. You want it to be done several times over the course of many days. Okay, so don't be afraid to ask that. And you can sort of think in your own mind, let's say there's limited resources and they can only have 6 hours, for example, to conduct this. Well, when do you most see the problems? Is it from 11 to 12 when your child's like anticipating lunch is coming and they're starving and getting frustrated and can't pay attention? Is it at 2 p.m. when they're tired? Is it somebody that's in their class at 1 o'clock that they have struggles with in their relationship? Think about how you want, what would be the most sort of efficient use of time to make sure you get the information that you need. So this is what it is not. A list of misbehaviors. We want to know why a specific behavior hurts. And to be honest with you, who needs a list of misbehaviors, right? Like, you can write down a list of misbehaviors. There's something special about that. That's not helpful. It helps the team determine why a child does specific behavior. It helps guide decision-making, intervention strategies. If your child is removed from the classroom for more than 10 days, they are required to have this, okay?
How often are they required to reassess it?
Well, it would really depend on what they're seeing and if the behavior is changing. So if you do one and then 3 months go by and it's getting worse, then you may want to redo it or at least revisit it.
Because they did one when he was in 1st grade and we put a behavior plan in place. And he has completely different behaviors this year.
Okay.
And the same times with the same problems, the same things are happening, and I'm just.
It's part of your IEP now, your week, right? So I think I might, at the next IEP meeting, just say, I would like to go through this, the current one that's in place, highlight what is no longer accurate or no longer part of his day or whatever, and talk about whether or not we need to do another one. And just bring it to their attention.
They should review it.
Yeah.
They don't always do it again.
Right.
They just tweak it or.
But
that's fine. I just think it's not, they're making plans based off of this thing.
Right.
It's inaccurate.
That's inaccurate, yeah.
Now, I feel by watching all of the scenarios that, you know, when they change who your child's case manager is in the school, I just feel like I'm starting all over again. I do. I feel like I'm starting all over again because this person doesn't know me. I already established a relationship with the previous one.
Can you request that they don't make that change?
We have, but they said that they're, yeah, go ahead.
What they do is the case manager requests to have you again, but if it does not fit in your schedule that she can have you again, they have to switch your case manager.
Oh.
Can they switch your schedule?
Exactly.
Sorry.
Or her schedule
fits into the schedule, so they have.
You- So like her 8th grade year was horrible. Her 6th grade year was great. 7th grade year was great. 8th grade, oh my God, horrible. That
What grade are you in now?
I'm sorry.
And so freshman year
I don't
was
get my
great.
case manager in my classes anymore because they switched over, so now there's like a new person.
Mhm.
So they're not always up to date with me.
Well, because she's doing so well. You see, she's so successful.
Well, you are up against a little bit of a challenge, so anytime a child presents with really good, elevates.
Exactly.
It does.
They don't, what does a case manager do?
So a case manager is sort of your link to the school district. They help run the IEP meetings, help facilitate the IEP meetings. And this is a little bit, it varies a little bit in each school district. But they're sort of your go-to person. You can troubleshoot with, you can schedule new meetings with. They're sort of your child's touch point. And most of the time, schools try to keep them the same over, within elementary school, middle school, high school. Most of the time they tend to stay similar. That's not always the case, but there's some benefit to that. There's also some drawback to that. I mean, you get some perspective that you didn't get from another case manager, or maybe more flexibility or things that speak to you too. It just depends on.
Do they help the student directly?
They can help the student directly. The student has access to them. Now, they're not a school counselor, though they could be in theory, but they don't offer support in that way. They're administrative more.
I'm just wondering who would be the person who could help my daughter with, okay, what is your homework today? The job that I do now.
Oh.
But I have not been able to go to work full time because every single day for years I've said, okay, what is your homework? Why are you not, can you write it down in your planner now?
Okay, got it. That's probably not the case manager.
Okay.
That is, go ahead.
Go ahead. I was just gonna say, usually, I mean, that would be in your IEP, that they would get check in and check out at the end of the day to make sure that they filled out their planner and that kind of stuff, so.
Like ours is a special ed teacher.
check.
Yeah. They
Oh,
can
yeah,
have like
you
5
can
minutes at
have
the
that in
beginning
your
of the day, 5 minutes at the end of the day where they
Mhm.
just make sure they've got everything before they go home.
So it's somebody in
But it has to be
special
in-
ed,
It's in the, it's in the IEP and
Yeah.
under minutes for like the special ed teacher or.
it's typically, a special ed teacher or an assistant, in the class,
Okay.
an
So-
aide.
An aide, yeah.
Just to get through, so we can try to get through all of this. The typical steps in a functional behavioral assessment are identify the concern. And some of you really might only identify one concern. You might say, our biggest concern is that my child will not leave the lunchroom. For whatever reason, we cannot get them to leave the lunchroom when it's time to go. Or my child consistently shows up without their homework done. It's a really significant struggle. Others of you would be able to list 20 problematic behaviors that are consistently difficult for your child and cause problems for them in the classroom. But the FBA should address each one of those issues, okay? You're giving me a look. So identify the behavior of concern. Where does it occur? Where does it not occur? And that becomes really important. If it occurs at home, it occurs not at home. It occurs at school. It occurs in this classroom, but not this classroom. It only happens from 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. Those kind of things, clues become important. What happened right beforehand? Always know what happens right before a difficult behavior. That's really important. Is there a pattern to it? Can you predict that it's going to happen? So all of us have certain things that I know that if we do something to your child's schedule or to the routine, or they don't expect something, that it can throw them off course. And so that can be an antecedent, something that precedes a behavior that's difficult for your child. What do they get from it? So this is the question we don't usually ask very well. So if your child, a good one, and we described this a little bit more, Your child kicks the seat of the kid in front of them repeatedly. And the teacher says, knock it off, stop doing that, right, for 10 or 15 minutes. And finally, the teacher says, go to the principal's office. Now I've told you 8 times, you need to go to the principal's office, and the child goes to the principal's office. What did they get out of that?
Out of class.
They got out of class. Like, it makes total sense. Like, they don't want to be in class, they're bored or frustrated or whatever. And so they got out of class. We don't think about it like that, because then we say, well, I sent him to the principal's office. Like, I gave the big gun, like I sent them out. And the child's like, yeah, you sure did. Like, thanks. I didn't want to be in here. Now, that's a very clear cut, which is not usually the case. There's usually a lot of different pieces to it, but to think about that. Possible reasons for that behavior, and that can be, I didn't sleep good last night. I ate something that didn't settle right. I didn't eat. Mom and dad had a fight last night. I spent too much time on a homework assignment that was too overwhelming last night, and I'm not in a good place today. Who knows? There's so many things that can go into it, but you want to figure out what that is. And then this is the key: what replacement behaviors? So it'll never work to just say, stop doing that. That's just never going to work. What? I know, it's crazy. Yet, what do we do sometimes? I keep telling them to stop doing it.
Or you need to calm down.
So that's just not ever going to work. Think about, and you're right, like, just for us, we can think about, like, if somebody says to you exactly what you said, you need to calm down. Well, I immediately calm down. Like, like, I come right down. If you tell me I need to calm down, like, that's just never going to work. But in the, to the credit of the school, I think, just the environment and the structure leads to, like, frustration when you have a kiddo who's not able to accommodate that structure. Well, we need to figure out how to help them accommodate it instead of just continuing to force them into the structure that isn't working. And that's what we get caught up in. So they serve a function to get something, to avoid something, or to have some control. So if a child feels completely out of control throughout the day, they don't have any choices presented to them, it's sort of my way or the highway, they're going to exert control just like any of us would. We might have better control over our behaviors, but we're going to do little things throughout the day to sort of say, oh, I'm in charge of this, like, this is my thing. So think about what might be feeding your child's behavior, why homework isn't getting done, or, I'll give you an example. I'm going to use you because you have told me about your child not getting their homework done. A lot of times we set the structure up of your child goes to the teacher at the end of the day, has to have a signature that they finished, they did everything they were supposed to do, and that is supposed to come home to mom and dad. And it's spelled out super clearly, that's what we're supposed to do. And the teacher doesn't do it. And the parent gets really frustrated, like, why isn't the teacher doing this? It's in the IEP, they're not following the IEP, we need this done. Well, when they explored a little bit, what they find out is the teacher's more than happy to do it. The child is not bringing the book to the teacher to sign. And for some kids, that's just sort of their way of being like, I'm in control. I'm in control of this. And so thinking through a way where they can both be in control and get the information they need is really important. Okay, does that make sense? Thank you.
Is it too ridiculous to ask that if it is, see that everybody else is doing it, so that I don't know.
Can you give me an example?
Well, like, if I was standing around, I saw this with quite a few of her teachers in the past, and my third child's teachers in the past, where everybody comes up and gets something done, gets their homework thing signed by the teacher to say that they did. And then the teacher signs off, and then the parent signs off. And then in the morning, the teacher checks it off. And then in the after school, before school's out, the teacher checks it off. It's just, what, 10 minutes maybe less for the kids to just kind of.
Oh, so you're saying it's in every teacher.
If the teacher did it for all the kids, if the kid just assumes this is just part of what they're supposed to do, instead of something, then the rebelliousness or the need to feel like, you don't, it's like, oh, okay. It's like that feeling of seeing it, oh, everybody's doing this. It's not just, and I don't want to do this. It's like you just kind of using peer pressure in a positive way.
I think that could work with certain things, absolutely. Now, could we get the teachers to get on board with that? That might be tough. But yes, that is a good way. That is not in high school probably, but that is a way to sort of twist it around to sort of mitigate that behavior. So that's a good idea. That's a really good idea.
High school is harder anyway, because you've got tons of teachers and stuff to go to. So
I just mean they want kids to be very self-sufficient in high school.
Yeah.
They don't wanna feel like they're.
Well, this is when she was younger.
5
She doesn't even need that.
So it's,
Okay.
it's 11:30 right now, and it feels like we're probably not gonna get through this whole thing. Are people able to stay longer? I know Christy had to leave, but are people able to stay longer? Do they want to stay longer?
Well, and
Should we take a quick break right now?
She has children in child watch.
Right.
So
She should be able to just sign them out and then sign them back in.
No, they close at noon, like, it closes.
Oh, it's closed.
Yeah.
Oh, they close it.
Okay. Why don't you take a
Until
2-minute break to
3.
go to the bathroom? We'll get through it as much as we possibly can. And then we'll either reschedule to finish, or all the documents will be online and you can go through. And you guys can kind of make that choice.
And you have cards.
Nobody's gonna go to the bathroom.
Perfect, thank you.
I'm
Holding it.
I'm
Okay.
gonna beat my command.
Okay, I'm gonna go as fast as I can though, so don't get frustrated with me. Just yell if you need me to stop, okay? So this is just a reminder. This is what you're looking for in that. An antecedent is the cause or event that influences the behavior. So thinking through, the easiest way to understand this is to do it at home. So just spend like an hour at home and think about, so an example at my home is not Annie, not my perfect Annie, but her sister, who's 15, doesn't like to get out of bed in the morning. And so I'm screaming and screaming, get out of bed. It just infuriates me. I'm just so angry. And what would you do instead? So I know what's going to precede it. She's tired. So she wants to sleep in because she's overdone it. She's exhausted. We can play this forward every day. This is the same thing that happens. I know what's going to happen. I'm going to get up, start yelling. I mean, you talk about predictable. It's extremely predictable. I want the behavior to change, but so the way I try to get it to change is then she comes down and then I yell at her all morning long because I'm mad and I want her to get ready and get going, and this is making everybody late. Look how stressed out we all are, blah, 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 right? There's one simple solution to this problem.
There is.
There is. You know what it is? Don't yell at her.
Mm-hmm.
Don't get her out of bed. Guess what? She's going to be late to school. I'm going to go to work. She's still going to be in bed, and she's going to have to go to the office and get the outcome of that choice. But I haven't done it. I haven't done it. I keep yelling.
Natural occurrence.
It's a natural occurrence. She needs to experience. It's not my job to get her out of bed. She's 15 years old. She has to get to school. So that's a good kind of predictable pattern of thinking through. What?
Go ahead and turn the light on,
Yeah.
I've tried that. I've done all that. Yeah. There is a sonic alarm that shakes the bed. I thought about that.
Too many of those, now you have to be involved again.
I know.
That's the
Yeah,
thing.
I had
You
boys,
have
so I
to
just
get
dumped
involved.
water on their head.
Oh, I haven't tried that, but that may be where I think Annie would like to do that.
I warned them ahead of time. I'm like, this is the point we're at.
Yeah,
So-
you're about to get it. Yeah, that's a pretty good
But to
idea.
be quite blunt, for my 18-year-old who had problems and she wasn't being able to wake up, and the doctor said she was being rebellious, and her father was yelling at her and getting upset with her. I'm like, Dad, this isn't my child. Something's wrong. And that was why I knew something was wrong with her. She wasn't able to wake up. We got her evaluated, found that she had a neck injury, which was radiating to her head and it was giving her headache. So, I had to really look
For the
instead
reason, the
of
cause.
yelling. Because that's not who she is.
Yeah.
I mean, for 3 years, when she's not having asthma, she's able to wake up and go to school and get ready by herself. And
That's a good point though, like looking at the actual drive behind the behavior. What is driving the behavior? Now, I'd like to say it's my daughter.
Well,
She's just not getting out of bed.
yeah, but teenagers are essential for the
They are.
child's body.
They're
And
absolutely.
when we went to the counselor, one of the psychologists, that was one of the things she said, is there something, she had to look at one part and then she had to look at another part.
Yeah.
And that was one of the things, was her drive would have made her tired anyway, because she was so, educationally focused,
Yeah.
that she's just tiring herself because of that. And now she's having this headache, and the two working together against each other, her need to learn, that, yeah.
Yeah,
And so
together.
whenever people say that, I have made it a point to say, look into finding out what other circumstances are going on in the body
That might drive that
before
behavior.
and that's why, that's a bigger reason not to yell.
Yeah.
Because then the guilt, when you find out something really was
A problem. Now, that body-driven behavior is actually, that is something I really do worry about more in kids who are like 6, 8, who are super sensory driven. So then you can look at things like, my clothes are itching. I didn't put deodorant on, my armpits are sticky. These are the things that will just really drive stimming or problematic behavior because it's so uncomfortable to them. My socks aren't right, I'm so hungry, I ate something sticky this morning and my teeth feel sticky and I mean, the list, the list goes on and on. No, they can't explain it. They can't explain it, but it's there. Yeah, and so looking at sort of that picture can help too. And then what's the consequence? So thinking through the consequence. I explained what consequence was for us. We're getting nowhere. We just keep yelling and getting frustrated. So thinking about how a specific behavior, what comes out of that. And really just pick anything, anything that you do at home and play that forward so that you can sort of just do what happened before, what happened during, what drove the behavior, and what's the consequence. That will help you sort of then do some of that in your IEP planning for school. If you're constantly hearing from the teacher, a good example is they yell out answers. Get up and move around a lot in class. And one thing I always encourage you to think about, if it's something that might be outside what is typically acceptable in the classroom, but isn't terribly distracting to the classroom, do we really need to pick that balance? So lots of students on the autism spectrum need to move. So it would be much more comfortable for them to get up and walk around the back of the classroom or rock their feet or whatever. And we can spend the entire day picking on those behaviors, or we can say, hey, in the big scheme of things, that isn't the behavior. Now, if you're hitting your partner, if you're kicking the chair, if you're pulling somebody's hair, things that are going to disrupt the class, that's a different ballgame. But sometimes it's even okay to push the school on that a little bit. Well, I hear you telling me that he's wandering around the back of the classroom a lot. But in my experience, he tends to learn better when he's moving. So what is the problem in that classroom? And sometimes it gets sort of things like, I don't know, maybe there isn't a big problem with that. So that's something that you can kind of ponder a little bit.
Sorry, I just have a quick question. So say you have a child that's having problems with behavior or whatever, but you have some solutions at home, like a weighted vest or a rocking chair or those things you put on the chairs where they can swing their feet or whatever. I know that a lot of times the school is supposed to pay for those things, but can I just say here?
Yes.
And then they have to use it?
They don't have to use it.
Yeah.
You have to agree.
IEP, and then they have to use it?
Yeah. If you all get to the point in the IEP, and the best way to get there is to explain the difference you see at home.
Okay.
When he's able to utilize his weighted vest at home during homework time, there's a tremendous change. And most of the time what you're going to get is, get me that weighted vest. I want that weighted vest. But occasionally you might run into, if it's something that they're really uncomfortable with, I'm trying to think of some physical thing that would really make people uncomfortable, but most of the time. Oh yeah, fidget spinners, you're gonna get in trouble with that.
Yeah.
That's a great thing though. Absolutely.
I'm just curious, we're still in kindergarten, so it's very play-based still, but I'm a little nervous when we move to first grade and it's very structured. We have to sit and listen and look at the board. There's not really, there's breaks, but it's not like kindergarten.
Right, yeah.
There's a big change between kindergarten and first grade.
And
So
some of those things,
where,
like the thing under the desk, is so not really that noticeable.
Right.
The things like that can make a big difference.
So he already wears braces and stuff, so he wears glasses.
Well, I mean more for the teacher to use.
Oh, the teacher.
Yeah. Or sometimes you can put things under the desk.
Yeah.
They can fidget with that nobody can see. That other kids aren't going to mess with, because other kids will see, hey, you get to sit on this ball,
right?
And I want to sit on that
or
ball.
Or you get a fidget spinner and it's making noise, or the clicking or whatever. So I was just curious, just trying to think.
Yeah, no, absolutely, yeah, so absolutely. And if they say, well, we don't have time to put the weighted vest on, what can I bring in? How about a weighted thing? The other thing is, I would ask them first,
okay,
we use a weighted vest at home. We use it similarly. Can you all get them a weighted vest?
Sure.
We use the kick thing. Can you get that? Because
they're trying to
get them to do it.
I would rather them do it, but if if they're not willing to do it, I'll be like, if I just purchase this for you and put it in the IEP, will you just do it? Because your day is going to be a lot better.
I get what you're saying. Let's just do it.
Yeah.
So this just talks you through what we just talked about in terms of behavior prediction, knowing what's going to happen and how you're going to. I was talking to a friend whose kiddo likes to stay out on the playground, doesn't like to come in from the playground. Well, I suspect that's a control issue. And to normalize it a little bit, all of us would want to stay outside on nice weather after 5 months of winter, and sort of normalizing. You might get a different behavior if instead of yelling at her to come inside, but somebody just went out there and sat with her and said, you know what? It is a really nice day. Today, we're gonna play an extra game of Foursquare, but tomorrow we're gonna have to go in 5 minutes early so that we can make up for this time. I'm gonna give you a choice. Do you wanna go in a normal time today, or do you wanna play Foursquare and tomorrow we'll go in 5 minutes early? Give some choices that give some control. They don't even have to be great choices. They just have to be choices so that the child can choose A or B. And sometimes that makes a difference. Other kids, that's not what's driving it, so they're not gonna respond to that, but think that through. Okay, and then you wanna always write in the behavior plan, not just what behaviors you're gonna make go away, in theory, but what you're gonna replace them with. So you're always gonna wanna replace it. Go ahead.
Question. So you had a great example of your ABC of like what my child does.
Right.
Angry, we add in like this vocal like screen that's like a big bird, and we'll pick up a chair and throw it. Okay. Obviously he's angry, frustrated, and that's okay to be, but the way he's displaying it is not appropriate. And it scares people.
Sure.
It's not necessarily what his
intention.
Scary kid. But can the teacher and I work together on trying to figure out the skill to teach him in a different way to show his anger? Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
So we can do it together.
Yes.
And
And you may pick something like that would be super appealing to him. Like there's certain, on this, when we talk about these behaviors, throwing a chair, it's just never gonna be okay. And the reason it's not okay is it can hurt somebody and can scare people. Those are the really key reasons, right? But it's okay, it is okay to feel angry. Like that's an okay emotion. All emotions are okay, right? Like you can feel whatever you want to feel at any given time. So I accept that you need to feel angry sometimes when things don't go your way, when you don't feel good or whatever it is. But these are your three options when you feel that way. You can write how you feel. You can go to the sensory room and we'll buy you a punching bag and you can just punch that punching bag a few times to get, or you can, this is actually, we do this in the hospital for kids. Sometimes I work at the hospital in real life. You can.
Even that pays the bills.
You can get an egg and you can write down how mad you are on that egg and you can throw that egg against a tree outside. You know, like give them something. Sure.
Well, yes.
Yeah,
I mean, so
that wouldn't work in the classroom, but thinking through like, I'm gonna give you some real ways to demonstrate that physical anger. I'm not just gonna expect you to hold it in till you get home, because that's clear, you know, and that's partly just an energy release for him, clearly, like, I'm holding it in, and I'm just gonna, it just doesn't always hold, you know, it's gonna bust out. Yeah.
What does that mean to find out what caused the energy to need to be pulled in the first?
If you can, but sometimes kiddos who are on the spectrum particularly, you're not going to be able to necessarily identify this set it off. Now, the goal is, yes, we identified this set it off. That's totally the goal. But it sounds like from the pattern.
Yeah, we have the self-contained classroom, so a lot for us, we already know what the trigger is, we know why it happened, and we can work through all that. But a lot of it is, we just need to change how it's being expressed. More guiltily.
And I've heard of, well, I've used punching a pillow or a mattress, or a pillow is something maybe.
True, but like we have these behaviors that happen at church,
Yeah.
in the middle of Walmart, things of that nature. So we have to find something that is, and we did, at home we started going, say ding, 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 which is hilarious.
Does that work?
It did.
Well, that's pretty good, yeah.
But it also makes him like really stand out. You know, like if you have a kid in the church Sunday school class going ding, 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 and nobody knows what that means, then it.
Now, to him, I just am curious, is ding, 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 ding sort of his way of like internal regulation, or is it ding, 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 telling everyone else, like, I'm having a hard time here?
That was us trying to teach him possibly a different way of being angry.
Okay.
And so initially it worked, and then I was not going to help him later in life.
Yeah.
So how old is your son then? So my son's psychologist, when we were doing belly breathing, but he's 6, so you can't just like belly breathe. So she taught him to make a fish face and to blow the air through the fish. So he would be like, and then he would like make it through that way. So you could do like maybe just, if he likes animals, like different animals or something that would be not as, like when you're in the middle of Walmart and he's ding, ding, dinging, that might be.
Sure, trust me, we have 5 therapists in and out of our home.
Oh, no.
Yeah. All the time, I mean, we have 8 in our home.
I'm not saying it worked yeah, it didn't really work. I mean, it worked for like a week for us. And then, you know.
Right, but I'm just like,
And in the moment.
can we find something, is this something that I can ask for?
Absolutely, yes. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
We got a lot.
No, you're good then. Yes, absolutely. You can ask for it and it should be written in the IEP. The goal is sort of making sure that it's actually happening. So if you're still getting a lot of reports of he had, you know, an explosive blow up 3 times today, well, then I would be wondering like, well, are you, you know, is he being offered to go to the sensory room? Are the things that we put in place to replace the behavior being utilized? Because sometimes that's a habit that we just forget to, like, we don't follow through on it. We think, oh, in the IEP meeting, that sounds like a great thing. But then when it happens in the classroom, it's busy and we just discipline. We try to shut it down instead of like, okay, this is that moment where I'm going to send you to the sensory room and give you an opportunity to work through that or whatever it is, whatever you decide.
And a lot of times I would say that 99% of the time they do those things already. It's just, I think, very ingrained that that's his response.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. But I appreciate your thought process that he's 8 and I'm talking about long term. You know, you're thinking long term, like how do I change his behaviors long term? Because sometimes it is so overwhelming that it just gets like, I'm thinking, how are we going to get through today? And you forget like what you're doing today is what you're doing in 10 years, you know, what he's doing in 10 years. So I appreciate you saying that. So I won't go through all this. You guys have probably already read this, but positive behaviors are not maintained over time with stickers. They're not. So you might get what you want for a week or a day or whatever, but long term, you haven't given a replacement behavior and it's just not going to be maintained. And this is true of all of us too, right? Like, it's kind of like when you're at work and somebody pats you on the back and says, you know, good job. But long term, you're going to have to give a replacement behavior. So thinking about what you're going to fill that time. What?
I said you're going to need to give that raise.
Exactly. Thank you. So sort of think about, you know, the sticker thing and the, you know, all of that is ingrained in the school culture. I totally understand that. Certainly as a parent, I've tried the sticker thing over time, but when you're talking about more significant behaviors you want to change over time and that you're really committed to changing, move away from the sticker thing, at least into, now you may have to start the sticker thing. You may have to start with like, hey, we need 10 minutes. We're going to have success for 10 minutes and 10 minutes. And a sticker, that's completely reasonable. But over time, you're going to expand all of that, and that sticker is going to become less effective, and you're going to have bigger things that you're trying to build in, you know. And so you don't want it to be like this physical give every time. That doesn't work until they're teenagers again, in which case the physical gift tends to work great, right? When I get asked for an iPad or gift card or whatever it is. So really quick.
The expensive stickers.
Yeah, the expensive stickers. 3D. Are changes needed in the classroom that would help them? So these are things that you can talk about in the IEP meeting. So when they talk about behaviors, if you come in and say, you know what, I have 3 or 4 ideas I'd like to talk through, that's a great thing. So here's some ideas. Can we change the way the class is grouped? Can we change the time of the day that we're addressing this specific topic that either they're super interested in or they're not interested in at all? Can you tweak the curriculum where they're doing exactly what you want them to do, but they're doing it on something they're interested in? So Annie, is it fair that you would be more likely to do something about musicals than about math? Right, because Annie loves musicals. So anything that the classroom does around musicals, she's fully into. Right, I mean, who doesn't love musicals? Yeah. So, but if it's just about math, but if you said count the number of times in that musical where this note is used, she'd be more than happy to do that. But she's not going to be super happy to do a math problem on that. What reinforcement replacement behaviors do you want? And again, this is you coming into the IEP meeting with some of this. Don't assume that your team is going to be ready to do that. So it can be helpful if you just sort of say, this is what I would like to see him do. Instead of having, let's say, an explosive outburst out of frustration 4 times, I have no idea, I'm just making this up, 4 times a day, I would be thrilled if it was only happening 2 times a day. And as a replacement for those two that we're going to try to get rid of, we're going to offer the sensory time. We're going to offer more exercise time. We're going to have additional 10 minutes of recess. What are you going to do to replace and give some of that energy another place to go? Is the child able to perform the replacement behaviors? You don't want to give them something, an expectation that you think is pretty unlikely they're going to meet. Because the more that they can't meet it, the more that they sort of fail in meeting it. What is that? Yeah, it's just gonna cycle. The cycle's gonna get worse. And then are the new behaviors enforced across all environments, right? So if one teacher thinks it's totally fine that your child, for example, takes part in stemming behavior that might, and they don't think it's distracting and they think it's fine, but another teacher's like, if I see that bookmark one more time, it's completely distracting to me as a teacher. It's distracting to the kids. It makes noise, blah, blah, blah. Well, in what class are you allowed to utilize their behavior? What class are you not? And as kids get older and they're switching classes and different personalities, and that's actually a huge challenge for kids, particularly who have anxiety or who are on the spectrum. Being able to read, like, this teacher has different expectations than this teacher shows displeasure in a different way than this teacher. That's challenging. And so helping them through that and helping the team get to a place of like, I need you all to have similar expectations. I need you all to sort of set forth the same framework for him throughout the day so that he knows how to operate the whole day. It's not he has to change his expectations and his behavior each hour, because that's just not going to be successful for a lot of those. Positive interventions, are a key part of the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. So instead of I'm going to take stuff away, we're going to do it's how do I intervene in a way that just replaces behavior in a positive way. Okay, so if you're seeing a lot of punitive replacements, that's not going to help. Okay. So I guess I'm trying to go through these as fast as I can. Teach the behaviors you want to see. So not super helpful when I'm yelling at my child and at the same time telling her to be respectful, right? That's just not going to work very well. Model those behaviors. Consistently recognize them, and that's really important across classrooms, that your child's being recognized across classrooms for really effective behavior choices instead of just one teacher.
What are good ways to get that? Granted, we're only in kindergarten, but I have found like the specialist teachers have no idea that she's on an IEP. So we've been having all kinds of problems in PE, and I went and talked to the PE teacher. It's April when this happens. And he's like, oh, I had no idea she had global apraxia that might make her more difficult to do PE things, so she's getting frustrated and acting out.
I can answer that question for you. Okay, so at the beginning of the year, every year since mine were really little, I made a trifold brochure of him, and it has, things that he likes, things that he doesn't like, things that he can do well, things that he can't do at all, or just, some things that help him and things that are going to guarantee that this is what's going to come. If you don't want that, then here's what you do. And I just make sure that at the beginning of it, I set up a meet and greet meeting. We call it an IEP meeting, meet and greet IEP meeting, where all the special teachers and everybody's there at the table, and I make sure that everybody gets one, and if there's somebody that can't make it, I make sure that I go to them and give it to them. It always has my contact information on it, with how they can get a hold of us if they need anything, and we just talk a little bit about him, stuff that he likes, what his interests are, so that they can have a conversation with him, make connections.
I do something different to make sure each teacher has a copy of the 504.
Okay.
I create an email list before the school year, or right when the school year is starting, and I just go to the school website and I say, okay, you've got these teachers. I have put them in my contacts list, create a group list, and then I just type name of school, and then I delete the ones I don't need to see this, like maybe the social worker or something. And then I say, I'm this girl's mom. She has a 504 for this and this. Let me know if you have any questions.
Now we follow that up with. just to be, if anybody chooses to use this route, please let me know you received this.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. I don't think I've ever seen.
And I think every student should have what you're describing. And if that's too much, like the brochure thing is too overwhelming, even if it's just a flyer.
Yeah.
And if I had, for example, a diagnosis of apraxia that I was dealing with, I would attach a very
This is what it
quick,
is.
this is what it is.
Yep.
Because we all know these diagnoses, but honestly, if you haven't been exposed to it, there'd be no reason for you to know that. And
But we had the issue with substitute teacher.
Yeah.
She had
That's
asthma.
the
She had asthma. My third child had asthma. And I was so surprised because one of the teachers said, well, you know, the substitute teacher and me and the other two teachers, we were just trying to discuss, how did your child come to school? And I'm like, she has a 504. This is supposed to cover the fact that all of you're supposed to know that if she's having severe asthma in the morning or didn't sleep well because of having, you know, allergies which are making her not be able to breathe, so she could eat or wheeze. And there's no way to be able to wake this child up and her be able to be breathing, being able to get ready and eat breakfast and go to school. If you're asthmatic, you're not gonna, sometimes you don't even have an asthma if you're on those medications.
Yeah.
And I try to avoid the bad medication, I really do, I try to avoid, but why didn't they just come to me? They know who the mother is, but they decided to have conversations on themselves. And it's like,
You're all too busy. And if you're not,
they weren't busy enough for them to
Well,
sit around and talk to themselves,
yeah.
knowing that there are these paperwork
Yeah.
at the school
Yeah.
level that says this is what you're supposed to do.
You may want to just draft a constant email that says, you know, FYI, so-and-so's not going to be at school today. As a reminder, she has 504 plan, which covers it, and it just goes out. You don't have to think about it anymore. It just goes out. Okay, you guys, noon. What do you want me to do?
How much more do you have to get?
Diane ran out, I don't know where
She's
she
gonna check and see about the childcare. Because
Okay.
they usually give us a
Let me
15-minute
run and check
warning.
and see if there's anything on the schedule, because I only booked this room till 12.
Okay.
So.
We're just going to keep talking until she tells me. So.
Yeah, you go
Yep.
for it.
I think the use is that recorded also, but it's like something.
Okay.
So.
Well, we'll be really fast. I'll let you guys know. In terms of teaching new behaviors, this is just a decent framework to work for when you're writing the goals.
Okay.
Okay. So you want it to be as simple as possible. It's nice if your child can monitor it themselves. There's nothing better than having your child monitor their own behavior, because that's really what you're teaching long term. Like, so if you're coming home and your child's 10 and they're getting like 2-star days versus 10-star days or whatever your school does, red, green, yellow, from the teacher, that's one thing. But you're building a much stronger and more effective system if your child rates their behavior. And the way you start that is your child and your teacher rate the behavior. So your child gave themselves a green, teacher gave them a red. Well, child and teacher have to talk about why they have different, rating is different that day. And then the child reports to mom, yeah, I gave myself a green, you know, Mrs. Smith gave me a red, and the reason we disagreed were blah, blah, blah. And it helps start bringing those behaviors together. And then by the time, if this behavior continues to be something that you're focused on, by the time they're in 8th grade or freshman year, hopefully they're much able to, number one, identify the behaviors that cause frustrations for teachers in the classroom, and able to really accurately assess their behavior. You know, every kindergartner is going to give themselves a grade every day. I mean, if you're in kindergarten, like, it's difficult for you to assess. You might be able to verbalize, yeah, I didn't have a great day, but I also don't want to get in trouble, you know? So thinking about that.
They have a lifeguard class at 1, so we should probably clear out of here by 12:30, 12:45.
Okay, well, let's go to 12:30 and then we can stop.
And this is open until 4, so we're good. And
okay.
it's okay for us to keep our kids a little longer today.
Oh, cool. They don't take a lunch break?
No.
Oh, they must just during the week.
Yep.
Yeah, usually there's like 3 hours off.
Okay. You guys, I'm not telling you this for you at home. I'm telling you it because you're going to be asked in your IEP meeting, or hopefully you'll be asked to give them some ideas about what you think would work for your child. And so giving some actual examples or hints of, these are how I want this addressed. Here's some ideas. Could we do this as a team? How can we build a plan? Doing some of this will be helpful. Okay. The top line is the most important line of the slide. What you're trying to teach is self-management. that you're not having to do exactly what you said. You're not having to do hand over hand executive functioning sort of fill in. They're doing that. And for some kids, they're going to have that down by 4th grade. Like they're wired for it. Other kids are not going to have it down ever. They're never going to have strong executive function skills. And sometimes it will get better as they get older, their brain matures, and they learn habits. Sometimes it's always going to be a problem. So knowing that you may really put a lot of time and energy into this, and it may not get as good as you want it to get, and that's just how it is. But what you have to do is the bare minimum. So right after you leave, when you go home tonight, I want you to write down the bare minimum. What is your bare minimum? Because sometimes, I mean, I have lots of wishes and hopes for what a given day will bring for my child and how they'll behave. But that's a different list than if you said, well, what's your bare minimum? And right now, sometimes it's reasonable just to think about the bare minimum, and you can build on that. So if the bare minimum is an accurate listing of homework, 1 to 2 behavior issues during the day, you got to school on time, what's the bare minimum? And then you can sit down with your child and say, this is what we're working on, these 3 things. And once they master that, and you've got 2 months of really good, outcomes here, you're going to celebrate that, and you're going to add something to your list. But it's much harder. If somebody handed me a list of like 15 things I needed to work on, and trust me, there are more than 15 things I need to work on, but that would be overwhelming to me. And nobody really feels a sense of like, I can have success with that. But 3 things, most kids, even kids with significant challenges, can pick that apart a little bit and have some success. And it needs to be super simple in the beginning.
If people use behavioral intervention plans, and this is a part of the IEP, right?
Right.
If they,
it will be if you have one. It's
right.
not automatic yet.
So if you have people use these kind of plans just for time management and executive function.
Sure.
Because I have not, but I just realized I have not been thinking of the ADD problems as behavior problems, but they are. Like my daughter, when she'll do her homework, then she won't turn it in. And I'm even resorting to turning the homework in the office for her over and over again.
Oh, okay.
Because she cannot remember to do that, and she'll get zeros and things she's completing.
Oh, okay.
And she'll
Yeah,
lose
that's
it,
painful, yeah.
and she won't go through it. I haven't gotten her to do any of that stuff. But there are things that she will do and will remember when she's extremely motivated.
Okay.
So their ADD is very influenced by motivation. So why don't I treat it as a...
You absolutely can treat it that way. The other thing I think to think about is I think when we hear the word behavior, as adults too, that's like a negative thing.
Mm-hmm.
But behavior is really not negative or positive. It's just a thing. Like it's just part of being human. It's just behavior. Some of it's, we might judge to be good. Some of it we might judge to be bad. But if you take that off of it, just be like, well, it's just behavior. I want to influence the choice. That's that executive functioning can be seen as behavior, as a demonstration of how their executive functioning works, or ADHD as a behavior, not as a negative thing. And I think we throw behavior around, especially in the school system. It's almost always negative when we're talking about behavior, right?
Always.
Yeah.
So, the initial IEP meeting, everybody agreed, including me, that there were no behavior issues, so we're not even going to look at that.
Okay.
And I was like, well, wait a minute. Now I'm learning, of course, they can learn to manage their ADD issues in terms of...
Yep.
Look at it. If they get rewarded enough, it's hard figuring out how to reward a team in a way that you did before, but...
Yeah. Point taken on that one.
That's great.
Yeah. See, provide meaningful positive incentives. It's right there at the top. Yeah. Remember that teaching is not always enough to change behavior. So that's super frustrating for families and frustrating for teachers. Like I'm telling you, I'm teaching you, and you're still not changing behavior. And why you're not? It's just not always enough to make a dent in behavior over time. They want to be recognized. And the expectations have to stay similar across the board, like we talked about. And then positive recognitions and reinforcements. This is really key. And I would actually write it into the IEP. How many of you think that your child gets 4-to-1 recognition for positive versus negative? Even in the home environment, right? No way. But
not even at home.
No, not even at home. And that's really what will change behavior. So we're going to focus less on the negative behavior and a lot more on the positive behavior. And when you say this at school, you might get like, what? But if you try it, you even just pick one thing and just really try to push on that piece, you might notice that it moves the ball a lot more quickly.
Well, it's interesting because in high school, they give you social, which is one of the issues we have, and they give social probation. But just like a star or a sticker, the kids you're giving these social probation for, at a certain point when they're in high school, they're not going to care to go to the basketball game.
Well, the other flip side is, do you want those kids involved in positive things at school, right? So we're seeing it as a reward, but really, I'd rather have my child sitting at the basketball game, interacting with their peers and participating in something effective than sitting at home, right? So it's kind of like taking away recess time.
Exactly.
And which is not good. Right. And so it's sort of that line of thinking. It's a punishment is really what instead of a positive behavioral change. So wouldn't I rather have a child, if I feel like I need to reinforce something, work the concession stand at the game, and have the interaction of that, and instead of punishing them by taking it away, when really they're going to get nothing from that.
And that's something we have to change overall.
Right. That's just
in any child behavior overall in any district where they're punishing children by taking. I mean, if the idea even comes through in any conversation that they want to take away recess, or like for high school, they want to take away extracurricular activities, then as a society, I feel like we need to, because otherwise all the children are
That's how schools are set up.
Yeah, that's culturally how they're wired.
They're wired for punishment. They think, because most kids respond to that. But they're not responding actually to, they respond to it, but they're not responding.
It's not learning. It's not teaching them the necessary skills when they go into the real world.
Well, and it's a replacement behavior. So what are you going to get from doing something? That's the same thing I feel about.
You know what I hear when I tell them that? They say, well, they'll get fired from a job. I'm like, but it's not that. Fired from a job is a very different mindset for an adult than a mindset of a 7-year-old or somebody who's 14 or 15.
Well, and we have to remember the kids in school is a learning environment. Like they're still learning how to do those things. Like they're learning how to do those things. So if we just, and I've heard that, I can't tell you how many times, if they did that at a job, they would get fired. Well, school isn't a job. I mean, I know we throw that around as like school is your job and my job is to go to work, but it's really not. It's a different type of environment. It should be a different type of environment. And then if you go through all these positive behavioral changes, you have to give meaningful consequences. So a good example, removing a child from a classroom who really wants to be removed from a classroom is not going to get you the behavior that you want. Meaningful consequences. If a child is kicking the chair of another student, they may just need a little bit of attention. They may need to move. They may be trying to make a friend in a very kind of way that we are not looking for. So thinking, if you continue to do this, this is going to be, this is a warning. If I give you another warning, this is going to be the consequence of that. But not in the midst of it. So I don't usually, in the midst of it is not a great time to sort of have this meaningful conversation with the child. But afterwards, talking to them about, hey, when you were kicking that chair, what were you thinking like Rosie was going to do? Do you think, were you wanting Rosie to say hi to you? Were you, wanting help with your homework and you were going to ask Rosie for help? Like, what was your thinking? Because sometimes they are thinking it through. And if you can get them to figure out how to say that to you or express to you what they're looking for, you might get somewhere with it. Mm-hmm. This is a tough one, planned ignoring, and if you don't think it's tough, go try to do it today. But this is really effective just for certain kids. Especially kids who are sort of attention-seeking in behavior. You have to make your mind up early. I'm going to ignore this behavior today. I'm just purposely going to ignore it. if for those of you who are married, try to do it with your spouse. I'm going to ignore whatever this behavior is that we always bicker about just for the next 24 hours. But
You'd be so happy.
yeah, it might not be as effective then in that way.
You'd be like, yay.
But if you go around to collect homework and you know this student isn't going to have their homework, and so you reach out and they say, I don't have it, you just move on to the next student. You don't acknowledge that, you just move on. You're not going to get any feedback from that. See what happens. If you have a student who doesn't raise their hand, who yells stuff out, you just don't call on them. You completely ignore it. And see if that will help them alter their behavior. It does require a certain level of self-control that I don't always have. But preventative cueing, and I'm telling you guys again, not because this is what you're doing at home, though you certainly can try it at home. It's for you to give ideas in the IEP about things you think might help your child. Preventative cueing is sort of like, if I needed, Annie's not listening to me, but you listening to me? So if she had turned on Alvin and the Chipmunks as her favorite show, and so if she had that on, then you know how loud Alvin and Chipmunks is. If she turns the volume up, she knows she can't today. But if she had it up and she caught my eye, if I just went like this, or to sort of say like, I hear you and you need to turn that down, instead of like, Annie, turn down Alvin and the Chipmunks, right? Which is a distraction of the class. It gets everybody's attention. It's totally different. So sort of seeing if that works in the classroom setting of just like catching your eye, like, I'm not going to make a big deal about it. That is hard. That makes it actually preventative cueing really won't work very well. But what might work is this. So proximity control is really just, you have trouble attending, or is just sort of, I'm just going to stand closer to you. Now, it's not the same as moving her desk out to my desk. That's not the same thing. And that is less effective than this. So I know that you have trouble yelling out. So if you yelled out, I would go to the next slide, which is actually, I might put my hand on your shoulder. Now, if I know you're somebody who's going to feel super threatened by that, which I should because I'm your teacher and I'm familiar with you, then I'm not going to do that. But I know that's not threatening. You just need a gentle reminder, like, oh, don't put like your hands up. So I'm just going to do that. And some kids are it's just like that awareness of like, my brain is going 100 miles an hour and I forgot to raise my hand.
So you can have the teacher walk by and just put something on their desk, a pre-planned, a little red card, a green card, or they can have them on their desk and the teacher can walk by and just take one from them, and nobody really knows except for them what's going on.
But it's just a tiny reminder, and it's not punitive. It's just a reminder. Nonverbal warnings, place cue cards, exactly what you just said. Discipline privately. So if you notice that your child's behavior throughout the day gets worse, let's say they had an issue at lunch where the lunch lady, I don't know, kind of let them have it in the lunch line for taking 4 fruit snacks, but made a public display of the discipline. And then you notice, hey, the behavior went downhill all day after that. It may just be how the discipline was done, and it sort of triggers a whole day of difficult behavior. And so really I encourage you as parents to encourage the teams.
It did. The exact thing happened. He got yelled at because he spilled his cup when he was trying to put it in the garbage can. And he does that all the time because he doesn't have very good physical control of stuff. And got yelled at really loudly, and actually the teachers really advocated really well for him, and I was very impressed. Yeah, because I was about ready to go after the lunch lady.
Wait, she yelled at your son for spilling juice as he was throwing it away?
Because you do this every day, and oh yeah.
Oh, I probably still would have gone Mama Bear on him even after the teacher advocated for my child.
His early education teacher, who hadn't seen him in a classroom setting for 2 years, went Mama Bear for me. So
Yeah, no.
That was
actually trying to do something where other kids just pour it on their thing and mix it in with ketchup and all of that stuff. Like, no.
Yeah, he just and he's ADHD as well as so trees will happens. And
That's a great example though of you want a system that you've developed relationships across the board so that everyone is looking out for the needs of your particular child whose needs are unique.
And he had the crummiest day after that. It really.
Well, of course, it makes you feel
like we need to have the lunch lady at the IEP.
You can make anybody.
We don't really need the lunch lady.
You can though. You can ask for the lunch lady at the IEP. That's completely fine. And then lastly, this is just something that takes time. It's just a habit. And you can't really force anybody in the school system to use this type of wording. I mean, that would be a difficult thing to do. You can use it at home. You can model the behavior. But if, you'll be able to go outside with friends during recess if you keep your hands on the desk. I will call on you as soon as you raise your hand. Not, you didn't raise your hand. Why aren't you raising your hand? Things like that. It's just a phrasing issue that sort of preps them for the behavior that is going to come because they're working so hard. Like, I know you're going to raise your hand, and I'll call on you when you raise your hand. Mm-hmm. Now, what if you tell a child to raise their hand and quit yelling answers out, and then they raise their hand 3 times that day, and you don't call them? Yeah. Right. So, yeah.
You got to follow through.
Right. It's a follow through issue. Give attention to kids who are performing well. I won't go through all of this because I feel like this is better. These are things you might ask for, but it's not going to go over well. For example, if you suggest in an IEP meeting that you really need to give attention to all the kids who are, you know what I'm saying? But this is some ideas for home. Now, helping your child keep track of their own behaviors. You probably have ideas. If you have a lot of people helping on behavior issues, they can give you all kinds of cool ideas. But think about, even if your child doesn't have significant behavioral challenges, this is still a really great tool to use because you can use it for homework. You can use it to monitor chores at home, but it doesn't really matter what you're choosing to do as long as you're helping them learn to track behavior or track choices or track responsibilities. So it is helpful. Honestly, I think if all of us knew how to do that as adults, gosh, I sure wish I was better at that as a kid because I'm not super great at it as an adult. Now, goals and objectives. You guys are afraid to even get into this because I feel like it's going to be too much. Instead of me going through all of this and just totally overwhelming you, I'm going to send this to you. But what questions do you have about the IEP process and goals and objectives that we could actually address your needs instead of me picking apart this as fast as I can in 10 minutes? What are your concerns or frustrations related to that? Go ahead.
I am having difficulty getting an IEP for my daughter. She's on a 504. We've had a lot of trouble getting an IEP because when they do, a lot of her issues are behavioral.
Okay.
But when they pull her out and do the testing, they give her the one-on-one. She gets the quiet environment. So she does really well on those.
Okay.
Then they put her back in the classroom where she has problems and is making no academic progress.
So they don't evaluate her in the classroom?
No.
She needs one of those fly on the wall, the thing that you said, like the people,
but
where they come and evaluate multiple.
But that piece of the evaluation is only one piece. So the testing is only one piece. So what you're going to need to ask for is that they track her behavior and her academic progress over time, and that they prove progress over time. So what I recommend, the sort of soft approach, is going and just requesting a meeting. You're not requesting an IEP meeting, but you'd like to meet with the administrator.
She's currently under evaluation now. We have the review on May 10th.
Well, maybe on May 10th, you're going to find out that they're going to do
I know, again.
Yeah, but academic progress is the measure that's critical. So even if she does well in a test, an evaluation, if in school, her grades are poor and she's not making any process.
Barely passable. Like she's,
okay.
Like it's killing me.
What I want you to do is call Family Matters and ask to speak with one of the advocates. So it's Patty Hooper or Carrie Potter. Any of you can do this. There's no charge to it. But I think when you have a very specific problem like that, they'll just walk you through this, then this, then this, then this. This is how to handle it. But there's one thing I want you to have in your back pocket.
Okay.
I'm going to see if I can find this slide really fast.
Are they sending you the results before the meeting?
No.
Okay.
I get them at the meeting.
Ask them to send them to you
before.
In writing.
Yeah. Ask in writing, send an email to the group and say, I need to have the information beforehand so I can.
Social worker last week, and I asked her last week, and she was like, I don't even know.
They may not have it yet. They're currently evaluating.
Yeah.
But you just want it before the meeting. You want it 3 days before the meeting. That's sort of a reasonable standard request. I need.
Is this so I can form an argument as to why?
Well, you can review it.
Just so that you're not shocked or just say.
So if you go in there and they're not going to give you an IEP meeting again or give you an IEP, then and then you'll have this other information to be like, okay, so now we need to do this to evaluate my child or whatever.
I just wanted to ask about something that we're probably not gonna get to.
Sure.
Because I know, like, this could be like a week-long seminar, I'm telling you, there's so much. You have a section that we're most likely not gonna get to about the extended school year. And I was just wondering how we get that in place. Last summer, I paid hundreds of dollars to have my son go through a couple of rounds of some reading practice with one of the teachers over this. So it was a school teacher,
Okay.
but it wasn't paid for by the school. It wasn't through his IEP. It was, she's decided she's gonna do this, and I took advantage of it because his reading was poor.
Okay.
And they always say he's making progress, but he's not at second grade level. He's still, I don't even know if he's at first grade level. Yeah, he's really come a long way this year. So this summer, I would like to not pay for that if I can and still get him some help. And I'm trying to figure out how to
make that happen.
Yeah.
The first thing is just ask, like, call a meeting and say, I think this is important.
We have our
I'll tell you.
IEP on the 3rd, so it's
Oh,
coming.
perfect. Okay.
I'm just trying to figure out, because they'll say, oh, it's not needed, but I'm just like, okay, he's making progress. Is he at grade level?
So they're not gonna, it's not so much in the summer about making progress. It's
Right.
about keeping the progress they've made. So if there's evidence to indicate he'll lose skills he's gained, then you're much more likely to get approval for extended school year.
Or if he's learning a new skill, if he's acquiring a new skill that without the intervention over the summer, he's not going to
Continue to
Yeah.
keep it. So that's really the wheel in which that turns. So it's not, can we keep making progress over the summer, which you can, but you're gonna end up doing that at homework, but it's that he won't lose skills. Now, they may say, well, we don't think he'll lose skills. And so then that becomes sort of a challenge. And what you may find is we don't end up with extended school year this year, but we track him very closely over the summer. We show that he loses skills. And then next
That's what I was gonna ask, is if he lost skill last year, did you see that happen?
Yeah, is there something that we sort of show
That's
you?
last year because
But he had to.
Right.
yeah, we did
But did
several rounds.
how did he do the 2-week break for Christmas? You can ask for, did he have
Right, that's a good
difficulty
example.
during, do you remember like when they came back in January? How long did it take him to, pick back up and
And write that all out very clearly. So if you got reports from the teacher the first few days back that he wasn't able to, attend, that he, we're playing catch up, things like that, you need to bring that to you.
Can it be behavioral as well as academic?
Yeah.
It would interfere with the
Because the first month is always a nightmare. The first month of school is always a nightmare.
Yeah, that's worth a try.
Especially, not only being a teacher, but just going from the summer, start with a different environment. So, okay, I'll see.
we do have advocates in the area now that can go to
Yes.
meetings with you.
We
I know,
have,
well,
Because there's a class that has been taught at U of I, Health and Family Matters, and one of the professors there for volunteer advocacy, and there are.
Are any of those people?
Oh, no.
Did any of you do it?
I
What?
I did not do it, but
So there are
You can
several
do it.
people in the
yeah,
CUO
Megan
group
said, yeah.
that
And
are advocates that can go to meetings, that can,
Mhm.
just there to take notes for you, that can intervene if you need something.
Where do you look?
Sometimes just having the advocate
Yeah.
there and not.
You just say,
It's just another person to say.
Are you a member of CUABLE?
No,
The
Okay, so I heard you got it from the newspaper, right?
yeah,
So this event is sponsored, or not sponsored, but we,
actually got it through someone at a NAMI meeting.
okay, so
National
this,
Association.
a lot of us here are members, or board members of an organization called CUABLE. And it's on Facebook. And
Okay.
so it's just CU, like the letters, and then ABLE. So then you would be able just to comment on there and say, is anybody here an advocate for this? Are you available this day? And yeah. But you can also write anything on there. I mean, we're just a group of parents who provide support and resources for you. Yeah.
And you can call Family Matters,
Yeah.
and Patty or
Yeah.
Carrie will send out emails to all the advocates and say, hey, can anybody make this meeting?
Because our biggest thing was this 504 plan thing, is that they kept saying, well, it's Wednesday. Wednesday's the day that they have late start. So, but if she's late on Wednesday and she has this problem, well, she's gonna be on social probation because she's late. I'm like, I can't control the weather. I can't control when she's hurting. I can't control her headache. This is her.
I do think you might have a little more success if you had a letter from the physician that more clearly
I don't know how
explained
much
the
more
expectations.
clear a physician can be.
Okay.
That's the thing. That's why I know this is a lot more deeper problem
Then that.
than, because if the person who's running the meeting was the school psychologist, and I mean, he said, I'm running the meeting. And he's the one who's saying, well, you know, if you fill this stuff out, we'll take care of all this for you. That was like, for me, a red spinning light. Because when we put together all these things, district, because I'm friends with some of the district nurses, and I'm friends with some of her teachers that she had in elementary school who were involved with elder school for all grade levels. So when we put these first things together, I always go to them first to go, okay, we're gonna have this again. What am I gonna be worried about at this meeting that I may not be aware that they're gonna bring up? And then they're able to direct me, or at least tell me what I'm about to experience. And that's why I say that there's something more when the guy is sitting there laughing, saying, well, if it's Wednesday, I'm like, no.
One thing I think, I want to get to this before everybody leaves, because I think it's critical, and I think this could help you as well. It is, at some point, you kind of have to decide, like, when I'm past the point of just sort of staying in the cycle of being frustrated, and I want to do something about that, right? Like, I'm so frustrated that I need to do something. So whether it be, I need an IEP, I need a different strategy to manage some of the expectations of school. This is a really good option. So it sounds like nothing, prior written notice. But all this does is say, you've had a meeting with the school, and in that meeting, you've asked for certain things. So whether it be flexibility related to health-related concerns, whether it be an IEP plan, whatever it is. I've asked for these certain things, and they've given you the response, and they've explained to you why they don't want to do that, or they don't think that'll be effective, or whatever, that's fine. Then you're gonna write a letter that says, in this meeting, this is what I heard you say. So you said that you were not going to provide an IEP because you know, based on your evaluation, you feel as though the progress that she has made will put her at grade level in 8 months, or whatever it is, you know. Whatever they said in the meeting, you're just gonna document it. Not your interpretation of what they said, what they actually said, okay? And then you send it by, you know, requesting a signature. So send it in May, what is it called?
Certified.
Certified, yes, thank you, to the school. And that is a legal document, this prior written notice, not any letter, just a specific, that they have to respond within 10 days to what you sent. So at that point, if you've documented, I'm not getting an IEP, and per the evaluation, she's 8 months behind and losing skills, blah, 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 or whatever.
2 years behind.
Okay, 2 years behind. Now remember, rely on your evaluations, not what you know to be true. What does the evaluation say? Then it requires that they respond. Well, it's a different thing for a school district to respond in writing than to respond in a meeting, right?
Mm-hmm.
So then it sort of forces the hand to say, like, yeah, we really did say that. We really did mean that. And it's actually a really powerful tool. So sometimes, and it's a soft, powerful tool. So sometimes you'll send this and they'll say, well, that's not actually what we meant. What we meant was, let's try an IEP for a year. You know, that's what we're going to say.
Yeah.
So it isn't a huge stick, it's a small stick. But if you notice that, hey, we just can't get out of this cycle and things are negative, we're not making progress, I think this is a really good tool to try.
And we send the letter to the school?
The school district, yeah.
The district?
Well, the school, the administrator of the school.
The
principal.
The principal, okay.
Yeah. But you should make it very clear.
What is your feeling on private evaluation
Our school has
versus
had some
school?
issues.
I mean, I know not all insurances cover
So they were asked to
private,
principal in a couple months ago.
but